welcome to the ultimate creepy, fascinating, disturbing, and downright weird Halo Iceberg. Now, I've spent the last few weeks crafting this iceberg on the anvil of HiddenXperia, and if I say so myself, I think it's pretty damn good. It contains some entries taken from icebergs made by He-Man077, Tobacco Crow, and Nikos, who, by the way, is an amazing YouTuber. But with that said, the vast majority of entries in this iceberg are entirely original and created by yours truly. Now, this is a very long video, not to point out the obvious or anything. Just to put it into perspective, my usual videos are about 4,000 words long. This video is over 24,000 words long. So we are going to be covering an incredible amount of the overall Halo mythos, from Halo's lore, to development lore, to community lore, and so many other things in between. And also, because of just how many videos I've already made about Halo in general, a lot of the entries in this iceberg I've already made videos about in greater detail, and they will all be linked down below in the description. So real quick, if you don't know how icebergs work, we're going to start out by talking about relatively well-known facts and details about Halo before descending into progressively more obscure, disturbing, and oftentimes just flat out weird and disgusting things. Now, I will say, given the length of this video, there is no way in hell that I can record it all in one sitting. My voice box will probably try and kill me if I do that, so expect a few costume changes throughout. Oh, and I also thought, just to honour the king of iceberg videos on YouTube, I'd wear the closest thing that I own to a Hawaiian shirt. But before we dive into this Herculean video, a quick word from today's sponsor, Magic Spoon. So, you guys have been noticing my gains recently, and by the way, thank you, the comments are really nice, I really appreciate them. And, well, Magic Spoon has been helping me hit my protein whilst keeping my calories in check. Magic Spoon cereal is not only nostalgically delicious, regardless of the flavour, but comes with 13 to 14 grams of protein whilst only having 4 to 5 grams of net carbs and 0 grams of sugar per serving. My favourite flavour is definitely frosted because it's a flavour that you don't really get much in the UK, and it just tastes inherently American while still somehow being very macro-friendly. But if, like me, you like a late night snack with a cup of tea, then, well, the Magic Spoon treats will come in perfectly. These bad boys come in a whole variety of flavours, packing between 11 and 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and between 1 to 2 grams of net carbs per serving, making for the most macro-conscious snack possible. Magic Spoon is really helping me hit my macros and my protein without eating tasteless, boring food. And by using my code Xperia, or by clicking my link in the description, you can try Magic Spoon cereal or treats today and get $5 off. You can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. And Magic Spoon are so confident in their product that it comes with a 100% money-back guarantee. That means that if you don't like it for whatever reason, they'll refund 100% of your money, no questions asked. So click the link in the description to go to magicspoon.com/Xperia, or just scan the QR code on the screen and get $5 off your order today. Thank you to Magic Spoon for sponsoring the video, and let's begin with the longest video that I have ever made. So, starting out the iceberg, in Tier 1, Grunt Tier, we have one of Halo's most iconic elements, teabagging. The art of teabagging is arguably Halo's most iconic tradition that has since become commonplace in all of gaming. Spamming crouch over somebody's body to simulate, well, dipping your teabag in their tea. It can also be used as a means of non-verbal communication as well. Krieg. Krieg is a brute that was born from Halo Infinite's disastrous gameplay reveal in 2020, and went on to be the frontman of a band that toured the banished outposts of Zeta Halo. Now, I did see an entry in another iceberg that suggested that Krieg was a psyop or some kind of intentional plant on 343's behalf to get people talking about Halo Infinite, but, you know, given the reception of that gameplay demo in 2020, something tells me that that wasn't the case. Webbos. Webbos are an in-universe brand of cereal that you can find on the floor in ODST. The name and the strange art on the box is actually in reference to a character called the Webmaster, who's a really old-school character in Bungie lore dating back to 1996. Of course, this character is in fact just some mysterious Bungie employee in a gorilla outfit, for some reason wearing a cowboy hat. And yes, although this is certainly a very weird character, trust me, the Webmaster doesn't even come close to some of the strange entities in Bungie's lore that we're going to be covering later on down the iceberg. Noble 6 hiding in a cave. This is of course in reference to the extremely popular fan theory that Noble 6 in fact didn't die at the end of Halo Reach, and instead is hiding out in a cave somewhere on Reach waiting to reappear. Which, by the way, I can confirm is 100% canon. Rats. The Crow's Nest rats are hands down Halo 3's most iconic NPC, but I bet you didn't know that they actually reappeared 150 kilometers west in Halo Infinite on the map Bazaar, roaming the streets of Old Mombasa. The Halo Ring Experience. This was one of the events at Halo Outpost Discovery in 2019 that was essentially an immersive tour of a Halo ring in a planetarium-styled dome cinema. Now I gotta say, having actually experienced the ring experience in person at Outpost, this thing was awesome. It kind of reminded me of one of those old school funfair simulators that you'd sit in, except of course this was set in the Halo universe, so it was automatically cooler. Cyborg Master Chief. This refers to the Master Chief being called a cyborg multiple times in the early days of Halo, and although that description sounds false, technically it's true. A cyborg is defined as a person whose physical abilities are extended beyond normal human limitations by mechanical elements built into the body, which technically the Spartans are, thanks to the neural interlace that they have in their skulls that allow AIs to essentially become one with them. So, by slightly unconventional means, all Spartans, and by extension other humans too, are technically cyborgs in Halo. But then also in a more conventional way, there are some Spartans, like Cat for example, who are pretty clear-cut cyborgs thanks to their mechanical prosthetics. The bottom line though is that, yeah, Chief is technically a cyborg, so these old descriptions are still canonically accurate. Not Sid was here. So this is a pretty straightforward Easter egg on Halo 2's remake of Blood Gulch, Coagulation, where the titular words, "Not Sid was here," are engraved in the wall of one of the caves. It's safe to assume that Sid was/is a Bungie employee and that he was at no point here. Recon. Recon is one of the top 3 most iconic helmets in all of Halo, and a testament to the individuality and status that armor used to have when it wasn't locked behind a slop tier paywall. Initially, Recon in Halo 3 was a legendary helmet with a mythical status, only given to Bungie employees and a very select few members of the community for highly special reasons. For example, some of the earliest recipients of Recon were MLG and esports legend Walshy, Digital Fear, the creator of RB and the Chief, and also the guy who managed to splatter himself with a traffic cone. Getting into a game with somebody who had Recon in the early days of Halo 3 was literally the digital version of bumping into Tom Cruise at Tesco. People that had it in the early days were some of the earliest forms of e-celebrity to exist. But due to popular demand, when ODST released, Bungie resurrected the Vidmaster challenges for Marathon, and the reward for completing all 7 of them was the Recon helmet, and then sadly, every iteration of Recon since has lacked the soul of the original. Halo 3 Recon was a hallmark asset in video game history, and the way that it inspired the Halo community to get creative and do weird things to try and earn it was unlike anything that you see in the modern gaming industry. This armor really is just a relic of a better era of gaming. Halo 2600. Halo 2600 is a really interesting, I guess, semi-official Halo spin-off game that I guarantee you haven't heard of. Released in 2010, it's an Atari-style Halo game made by one of the absolute unsung legends of Halo, Ed Freeze. The game itself is actually part of an exhibition at the Smithsonian Art Museum, which is pretty cool. When it comes to gameplay, there isn't really that much to talk about because it is literally just an Atari game, but what is cool is that it saw a small physical release on actual, real Atari cartridges, which work just like any other cartridge for the Atari 2600, meaning that Halo 2600 is, at least for now, technically the only Halo game to ever release on another platform. I should specify, another console platform. Ed Freeze is a legend though. He was the head of Microsoft Game Studios in 2000 when they were in the process of acquiring Bungie, and from every ex-Bungie employee that I've spoken to, this guy is the perfect example of how a suit in gaming should behave. Ed Freeze is a truly great guy who fought Bungie's corner tooth and nail, and he's one of the pivotal reasons that Halo became what it was. Jason Jones, Halo 2 and 3. Bungie co-founder and legend Jason Jones has 2 secret cameos in Halo. In Halo 2, he shows up in the background of the legendary intro cutscene of GRAVEMIND, and in Halo 3, you can find him floating in this dark corner off the beaten path of the final level, both times surrendering topless for some reason. Halo CE Fuel Rod Gun. Now, Halo 1's Fuel Rod Gun is mentioned here because it is almost the black sheep of the Fuel Rod guns. Almost every version of the Fuel Rod from Halo 2 onwards was exactly the same. They're all gold, clip-fed, lower power rocket launchers. But the Chad Halo 1 Fuel Rod is purple, battery-powered, and functions more like a handheld artillery cannon with heavy rocket, or I guess rod, drop at range. Halo 1's Fuel Rod is hands down the greatest iteration of the weapon, and I will forever be annoyed that it returned in Halo Infinite as this abomination instead of the Banish-themed Halo 1 Fuel Rod that we always deserved. Original Noble 6. Spartan B312, our Noble 6, joins Noble Team right at the start of Reach, following the death of the original Noble 6, Tom A293, who's the Noble 6 that we see blow up the Covenant carrier and then also die in the process in the Deliver Hope trailer. Jeremy Clarkson is canon. So in 2013, when the Warthog was being added to Forza, Jeremy Clarkson did an official Top Gear style breakdown of the iconic vehicle, going through all of its properties in very typical Top Gear detail.
Unlike the Porsche, which is vulnerable to disappearing off the road backwards, the Warthog is only vulnerable to Banshee's fuel rod guns and light plasma cannons. So don't say you haven't been warned.
Which begs the question, does that mean that Jeremy Clarkson is a canon entity in the Halo universe? Have the UNSC or AMG resurrected him as an AI? I'll let you decide.
Where the hell are we?
50 Cent is a Halo fan. Now, there are a lot of really famous Halo fans, which we're going to come to later on, and believe it or not, 50 Cent is one of them, and we found out through a really weird circumstance. So during the heyday of Halo's MLG era, one of their sponsors hosted a meetup between Elamite and Neighbor, who were 2 of the top pros at the time, and 50 Cent and Soulja Boy, where they played Halo 3 together. This video feels like a semi-lost piece of old-school Halo media, and it's so weird to look back on and watch, but I figured it was worth a mention because this is such a strange, minute bit of general Halo mythos. Halo is canon in RuneScape. In the most recent RuneScape Easter event, one of the lines of dialogue says, "The hole doesn't look like a natural formation. Someone or something dug it, so it must lead somewhere." Now, given that that's an almost verbatim quoting of Halo, theoretically that means that Halo exists in RuneScape, and that somebody in RuneScape in the world of Gielinor has played Halo 1. I'm only 80% joking with that one. The dark reality of the Spartans. So for the final entry in Grunt tier, we have something that is deeply disturbing and incredibly dark, and that theoretically should be far lower down the iceberg, but it's this high up because, frankly, every man and his dog knows this bit of Halo lore. The fact that the Spartan 2s are, in fact, kidnapped children. Everybody knows about this, but if you somehow don't, well, the Spartan 2s, including Master Chief, were comprised entirely of 6-year-old children who were kidnapped from their parents. They were replaced by a clone, known as a flash clone, that would soon die of natural causes and then pumped full of highly experimental and dangerous chemicals to make them the ultimate killing machines for stomping out rebellions across the galaxy. Many children died or were severely crippled due to these chemicals, but others went on to become the near-invincible super soldiers that we play as in Halo. So moving into tier 2, Joe Staten tier, we're kicking this tier off with the most iconic Halo leak of all time, the supposed Halo 4 leak. Now, from what I remember, this leak started doing the rounds in around 2009-2010 as a supposed Halo 4 leak, but based on my research, this image actually far precedes that time. It was created by Bungie.net user Major Dump sometime in the mid-2000s, and depicts Chief facing off against an Alpha Xenome from Gunman Chronicles, which, again, I also only found out today. And yeah, it goes without saying, but this leak was very, very fake. The Peter Jackson Halo movie. Thanks to The Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson had undoubtedly the greatest start to the millennium in all of Hollywood, and that was going to continue originally with his Halo movie. In 2005, it was announced that Peter Jackson would be producing the Halo movie with Fran Walsh of Weta Studios, with Neil Blomkamp set to direct, but sadly, this movie ultimately fell through. Now, we're going to return to this movie quite a few times as we get further down the iceberg, but suffice to say that they were striking whilst the iron was at its absolute hottest. Not only was Halo near its peak popularity, but Peter Jackson was also at his absolute peak at that time as well. This movie, had it happened, would have been tremendously successful. Scrapped levels. This obviously refers to the fact that there's a litany of scrapped levels throughout all the Halo campaigns, with arguably the most iconic being Halo 2's Alpha Moon and Forerunner Tank, and Halo 3's Guardian Forest and Forerunner City. Scrapped weapons. And this entry is exactly the same, but for the weapons, including things like Halo 1's Gravity Wrench, Spear Gun, and Gravity Rifle, Halo 2's GPMG, Jackal Shield and Disintegrator, Halo 3's Excavator and Guardian Eye, Halo Reach's Forerunner Staff, Halo 4's Bishop Beam, and many, many more. Truth's voice actor change. So, as I think we're all very aware by now, the voice actor for the Prophet of Truth changed between Halo 2 and Halo 3. In Halo 2, he was voiced by Michael Wincott, but Wincott didn't want to return in Halo 3, so they recast Truth as Terrence Stamp. Now, both versions of Truth I think are pretty good, but it's undeniable that Halo 2's was just god tier and by far the superior version. Vidmaster Challenges. The Vidmaster Challenges were unique challenges across the entire suite of Halo that were added in Halo 3, and were also present in ODST, Spartan Assault, Spartan Strike, and also Halo Wars 2, but funnily enough, they actually originated before Halo. They came from Marathon. Vidmasters like Endure and Annual are beyond iconic, and if you ask me, Vidmasters should be a core staple of every Halo game moving forward. The BBC incident. So this one's quite funny. In 2012, the BBC did a report on something pertaining to the UN Security Council, so the UNSC. And clearly, the person who did all the graphics for this report wasn't a Halo fan, because they used the Halo UNSC logo over the actual UNSC logo. This was a pretty iconic moment of gaming crossing over into the normie world, but trust me when I say that it is by no means the craziest example of that we're going to be covering today. Halo is a cool guy. This refers to the most famous Halo 4chan post of all time. For some reason, some guy in 2007 woke up one morning and decided to post, I think Halo is a pretty cool guy. He kills aliens and doesn't afraid of anything, on some board on 4chan. And it's since become a rather iconic copy-pasta, so much so that even Halo Studios have referenced it with a weapon charm in Halo Infinite. Now, in researching this post, I found an even more incoherent version of it from 2009 that I have to share. Am than Master Chef gotted the plasm. Am than Master Chef gotted the plasm riffle and shattered alter aliens. The thread descends into far more weirdness from there, but you get the picture. 7. Bungie are of course lovers of the number 7 and have been putting references to it in all of their games since the dawn of time, or the dawn of the company, and Halo is by far their most iconic example. Some, but by no means all, of the 7 references in Halo include the 7 Halo rings, 7 Vidmaster challenges, 7 Covenant races in Halo 2, 7 Covenant vehicles in Halo 2, Halo 3's 7 Wood, 117, and many, many more. I've linked the Halopedia page for 7 down below in the description if you really want to dive into every single 7 reference, but if you do, I think you'll be there for quite some time. Destiny awaits. After Halo 3, many of Bungie's leadership, including Jason Jones, began or had already shifted their focus to what would come beyond Halo. Of course, Destiny. And so, they decided to hide a little Easter egg reference to their then unannounced IP in Halo 3 ODST. A picture of Earth with the moon that looks an awful lot like the Traveler, with the caption, Destiny awaits. Of course, at the time, nobody thought anything of this because Destiny didn't exist yet, at least to us. But as soon as Destiny was announced, well, everybody went back and clocked it. Sadly though, this Easter egg, likely due to copyright reasons, was removed in MCC. Gears of War 5. Gears of War 5 contains the first Halo Gears of War crossover of all time, literally ever, which is quite insane to think about. It took 13 years for some reason, but boy, was it worth the wait. Not only did Gears 5 include Kat as a playable character, but Emil as well, which given Gears' gore, feels like a real natural fit. Playing Gears 5 as Emil and performing some extremely violent executions just makes me wish that Halo would adopt this level of gore. Emil is so perfectly suited to a crossover like this, it's insane. Oh, and the reason this was done was because Gears 5 released right before Halo Reach came to MCC, so it was like a little celebration of that as well. Halo Wars 3. A sequel to Halo Wars 2 was pitched to 343 and Xbox sometime in 2017, featuring a shift from ground RTS combat to being essentially what looks like a space grand strategy game, where you command entire fleets of either UNSC or Covenant ships in huge naval battles. However, as I'm sure we're all aware, this pitch was rejected, and then in 2021, 343 confirmed that they have no plans right now to make Halo Wars 3, which sucks because I know for a fact that this version of Halo Wars would be a dream game for so many people. The Yonhet. The Yonhet are the product of cheap, god-awful character design born from Halo Nightfall, and thankfully a species that the canon seems to have all but forgotten since. They're really obviously just human actors wearing some mask and weird hand glove things, but in universe they're members of the Covenant Fringe who are known for their smuggling and black market tendencies. Honestly, the less of these things that we see, the better. Pistol kanji. Engraved on 3 iterations of the Magnum are a series of kanji symbols, Japanese and Chinese characters, and also the Korean equivalent called Hangul. On the side of Halo 1's M60 is this kanji symbol, which translates to 7, and then on the underside of the mag is this symbol, which translates to strength or power. The Korean Hangul for 7 can be found on both the slide and the underside of the mag again in Halo 3, and the SOCOM from ODST also has the Korean Hangul for 7, this time stamped on the side of its lamp. Marathon. Marathon was Bungie's main big franchise before Halo. A mostly narrative-focused single-player experience where you play as a cyborg security officer fighting off various aliens whilst working with and against rampant AIs to stop a primordial horror from being freed from the sun. Marathon ended up being one of the prime influencers for Halo, so much so that when it was announced, many Marathon fans thought that Halo was in fact Marathon 4. From core elements of Halo's story being near identical to Marathon, to the Marathon symbol being everywhere in Halo, even going as far as being the literal forerunner symbol for humanity, Marathon is absolutely core to the identity of Halo. Cursed Halo. Cursed Halo is without a doubt the most iconic Halo mod of all time. Made by Inferno Plus, this mod does exactly what it says on the tin. Turns Halo into an utterly cursed experience, featuring D20 dice grenades that can spawn literally anything, Minecraft weapons, a user shooting Magnum, a flappy Banshee, the Gmod toolgun with a billion different variants, and so many other things as well. The mod is so successful in fact that it spawns several derivatives for other games, with my absolute favourite being Gashnor's Cursed Halo 3, ODST, and Reach, all of which are genuinely on par with Inferno Plus's original and are well worth trying. Halo 2 Forge. So I don't know why this entry is in here, because obviously Halo 2 didn't have Forge, nor was it ever intended to have Forge. Halo 3 was of course the first Halo game with Forge, but Forge actually dates all the way back to Marathon. It was also the name of Marathon's map editor. That said though, Halo 2 Vista did come with its own map editor that also had an example map called Example, which was home to the kind of, but not really iconic cut Halo 2 version of the suppressed SMG. So although Halo 2 had a map editor, it didn't have Forge. Forge came into Halo in Halo 3. Arby and the Chief. Arby and the Chief is the most legendary machinima series of all time. Yes, even more legendary than RVB, fight me. That follows the adventures of real-life Master Chief and Arbiter toys. Created by John Graham, or Digital Fear as he went online, it premiered with a series called Master Chief Sucks at Halo 2 in 2007, before becoming Arby and the Chief in Halo 3. Arby and Chief are both voiced by Microsoft text-to-speech voices, Microsoft Mike for Arbiter and Microsoft Sam for Master Chief.
That is absolutely disgusting. No you.
And the adventures that they get up to are frankly hilarious. Honestly, I rewatch this series semi-frequently, and I feel like for the most part it's still as funny as it was back in 2007, 2008. Go and drop John a follow on Twitter and also a sub on YouTube as well, because he's still around and he's still making new stuff. The guy deserves all the support he can get, so his links are down below. Gold Warthog. So the Golden Warthog is the first of many Halo urban legends that we're going to be covering in this iceberg. On the Halo 2 map, headlong, there's a billboard commercial for a Golden Warthog. And of course, because it was the noughties and ignorance was bliss, people assumed that this meant there was a Golden Warthog hidden somewhere within Halo 2. A billion conspiracy theories were created, and 100 billion methods of finding and spawning this Golden Warthog were tried, but lo and behold, the Golden Warthog was nothing but a myth the entire time. Bungie played us like a damn fiddle. Hidden Xerpia.
Hidden Xerpia is me.
Isolation Infection. Given that Isolation is of course a flood-based map, the longer that you stay on it, the more the map becomes infected by the flood. You can literally see the flood spreading in real time through the ground, which is really cool. Finding the Holodrone. This one's really simple, so you can find the Holodrone early that the Heretic Leader's hologram spawns from to give his god-tier speech at the start of the Oracle.
I wondered who the prophets would send to silence me. An arbiter. I'm flattered.
When you get to its room, before you drop down, you've got to jump up onto this pillar, turn around and jump onto this ledge, and then up again to this platform, and then grenade jump up into the vent, and the Holodrone is just floating there near the ground. Weirdly, they actually added an achievement for finding the Holodrone early in MCC with Halo 2 Anniversary, which I thought was a really weird but really cool choice. Shooting through the deployable cover. Now, this is something that I only learned in recent times, and it absolutely blew my mind when I did, which is why it's part of the iceberg. Did you know that in Halo 3, you can shoot through the deployable cover? Of course, it can only be shot through from one side, obviously, or what the hell would be the point in it, and only select ballistics will go through, so no plasma bolts will pass through it, but I feel like barely anyone knows about this. I never saw anybody do this back in Halo 3. Granted, the deployable cover wasn't on that many maps, but even the maps that it was on, I don't think I ever saw a single person shoot through it. This blew my mind when I found it out. Drivable AA Wraith. And to round out the Joe Staten tier, we have this certified 2007 HUD classic. Bungie cut the ability to officially drive the AA Wraith in Halo 3, but if you blow its hatch, crouch in a position where you can't board it, hold the action button and kill the driver, you can hop in and drive it, just like it's an official vehicle. Just don't get out or it'll automatically explode. This thing is so fun to use. It single-handedly carried me through the Covenant on Legendary for 18 years now, and long may that continue. Opening tier 3, we have the Alex Garland Halo movie. So when Bungie first decided to turn Halo into a movie after Hollywood had requested so many times to do so, they knew exactly who they wanted to write it. And it was all thanks to 28 Days Later. So in 2003, Joe and Marty went to go see 28 Days Later, and upon leaving the cinema, after loving it, Joe asked Marty who he'd want to do the Halo movie. And then he said, "I bet that Garland guy would be all over the flood." Then fast forward a few years, unfortunately, as we know, the Halo movie never actually happened, but they did get Alex Garland on board for quite a while. I mean, he even wrote a script for the movie. Now, I have already done a video going into Alex Garland's Halo movie script in full detail because the entire thing leaked a few years ago, and of course, the link to download that is also down in the description, but the long story short was that his version of a Halo movie was a mostly faithful adaptation of Halo 1's events, with some things changed here and there, that had an ending that also better fit into Halo 2, which was, of course, going to be the sequel movie. Now, we are going to revisit this movie way further down the iceberg, but suffice to say, as a lifelong fan of both Alex Garland's work and also 28 Days Later, that was like my kind of formative horror movie, I am still to this day heartbroken that that movie never materialized. And also, just real quick, I am still, as of this video going live, trying to get in touch with Alex Garland to get him on a video to talk about his Halo movie and his general involvement with Halo. So if anybody watching this video happens to be friends with Alex Garland or to know him or maybe even his agent, then please let me know. The official Halo 2 condom. So as a part of Halo 2's frankly insane marketing, Bungie and Xbox commissioned a line of limited edition Halo 2 condoms, actual real Halo 2 condoms that even had "coming soon" written on the back. Now, I've searched high and low to try and find any kind of rationale or backstory behind the creation of these things, who came up with it, why they came up with it. I think at the end of the day, it was just a byproduct of the early 2000s culture. I mean, this is the same era as when Acclaim ran a marketing campaign for Turok Evolution, where if you named your newborn child Turok, legally Turok, they'd pay you $10,000. It was the same kind of era as that. That said though, there is a really funny clip of Sketch a few years ago on a 343 social stream, like an official public 343 stream, revealing his condom, because he worked at Bungie all the way back as far as, like, I think end of Halo 1, all the way up until Reach. He had the condom and he pulled it out on stream, which is kind of wild that he did that on like an official 343 stream, but the mad lad actually did it. Bungie ending Halo with Halo 2. So originally, Halo 2 was meant to be the ending of the Halo franchise, or at least Bungie's involvement in the Halo franchise, and in their original ending of both Halo 2 and the franchise, the Ark that Guilty Spark refers to at the end of the Halo 2 that we got was in fact the Ark portal at Voy. That portal facility was just the Ark. The original Halo 2 ended with the Covenant being defeated there at this Ark, with the Arbiter discovering a foreigner skeleton in a casket at the base of the facility that was identical to a human skeleton, thus confirming that humans are indeed foreigner. And then it would end with a cliffhanger that the Flood was still out there and that Cortana was still their prisoner. Now, to say that this was supposedly meant to be the last Halo game that we'd realistically ever get, at least from Bungie, as far as we know that was it, it's weird that they still plan to end the game on the very same cliffhanger as Halo 2. Also, a few years ago, C3 Sabertooth, who was another YouTuber, made a fantastic animation of the official storyboards of this ending, which you've seen on the screen, and I've also linked down below in the description. Please go and check them out, they are awesome. Cortana infected with the Logic Plague. So this was a possible, and in my opinion, the best possible explanation for why Cortana turned evil in Halo 5 that was really popular back in the day when Halo 5 came out, and was actually the theory that I kind of built my channel on. A lot of my early lore Flood theory videos were all centered around Cortana being infected and what that would mean for the future. Basically, the theory posits that the reason that Cortana was evil in Halo 5 was because the insane amount of damage that the Gravemind did to her between Halo 2 and Halo 3 not only forever altered her, but also planted the seeds for the Logic Plague. Now, we'll come to what the Logic Plague is later on. I'm sure many of you watching already know what it is, but if you don't, it's essentially the way that the Flood infect and or corrupt non-biological, sentient, or even non-sentient beings like computers or AIs. Now, I very rarely do this, but I'm going to take my flowers here, okay? I'm gonna take my flowers, because I was the main person talking about this theory and pushing it back in the day. I made so many videos about it, and still to this day, I think that it's the most rational, logical, and interesting explanation for why she is the way that she is in Halo 5. It was the best way to take that absurdly stupid plot decision, but as we all know, they didn't go down the Logic Plague route, and instead they went down an incredibly boring route instead. Not gonna lie, still kinda pissed off about that. They should have done the Logic Plague. The Mantle of Responsibility. The Mantle is one of the most important elements of Halo's lore. It's a philosophical role that began with the Precursors that is figuratively held by the dominant species in the galaxy. It's a mantle of care and stewardship over all of the weaker species of the galaxy that dictates that those who hold it must care for all life in the galaxy, but also must allow them to exist as they wish. For example, those who hold the mantle are able to let lower species war with one another, but to launch a full-scale assault against a lesser species themselves entirely unprovoked would be a grave violation of said mantle. So you can let them all fight, that's perfectly fine, that's natural, but you can't all of a sudden go bending the mantle and annihilating species under your control and under your guidance for no reason at all. When the Didact composed the innocent humans to create the Prometheans, that was seen as one of the Forerunners' many violations of the mantle. There were even debates about whether the Halos were a grave violation of the mantle as well, which, by the way, the Halos, I would say, were definitely a violation of the mantle, but a necessary violation. When the Precursors looked to pass the mantle down to one of their child species, they chose humanity over the Forerunners, which caused the Forerunners to lash out and exterminate their creators in an act of rage and denial. Ironically, another violation of the mantle, and thus proving why the Precursors thought that it should go to humans over them. CSGO. So when MCC came to PC in 2019, there was an official collaboration with Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And as a near lifelong massive Counter-Strike fan, this collaboration was genuinely like a dream come true for me. Unboxing sticker packs and putting loads of Halo stickers on my guns, or having a vinyl that plays Halo 2's soundtrack when I win around or in the lobby was literally a dream come true. I still have all my stickers and I refuse to put them on any gun besides I think I put a Noble Team sticker on my USPS and that was it. I'm telling you, these stickers, these bad boys right here, these are going to buy me a Porsche one day. Trust me. Fortune. Now this one is a real HUD classic. So in Halo 1, if you make your account profile the name .fortune, you get a random fortune cookie style message. And what's weird is that doing this is one of my earliest Halo memories, and I have no idea how I found it out because I got Halo in 2002 and we didn't really have, well, at least I didn't have internet that I could really access until like 2005 maybe? You know, if I ever get a time machine, I'm going to go back in time first and foremost and figure out how I found out about this before using the internet. Fortune Easter eggs also exist in Halo 3 and Halo Reach as well, but you get the same message every time. My modem is on fire. Also, to my surprise, Fortune is actually carried forward into MCC as well. It works in MCC, which I did not expect. .ASFile. Now, this is quite possibly one of the most legendary things that Bungie ever did. So when creating Halo 2 Vista, Bungie hid a picture of developer Charlie Goff's ass in the files as an error when a file with the extension of .ass caused a crash. The source of this image is rather funny, so at that point, the then CEO of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, came to do a tour of Bungie Studios, and somebody dared Charlie to moon him, and when he did, that legendary picture was created. So yeah, that's Charlie mooning the CEO of Microsoft. Now, of course, they expected nobody to ever find this image. They thought that it would just be buried in the files and never to be found again. But people did find it. And the problem is that Halo 2 didn't have a rating for nudity, which it technically should have had because it had a picture of an ass cheek in it. And so this caused a massive firestorm between Bungie and the ESRB, who rate games, and led to Microsoft being fined $500,000, led to them also having to fire a number of employees, and even almost caused the ESRB to file a lawsuit against Microsoft for it. Pretty legendary and cataclysmic mooning, I'd say, as far as mooning goes. Halo Chronicles. So this game is absolutely insane. A few weeks ago, I made a dedicated video about it that didn't do very well, and that really pissed me off, so go and watch it once you finish with this video. But the long story short is that Halo Chronicles was a Halo game that was made in collaboration between Joe Staten and a few other Bungie developers, and Peter Jackson in concordance with his Halo movie. Oh, and just random fun tangent. Peter Jackson, it was announced a few weeks ago, he's trying to currently resurrect the mower in real life. Dude is literally a die-hard Halo fan and he's willing to bring the mower back to prove it. So in Chronicles, you start out the game as a Marine, but the more alien technology, so likely foreign technology that you find, your arm would begin to morph into the arm of a Promethean, and eventually your entire body would morph into that of a Promethean. The game had some absolutely insane gameplay mechanics, ranging from a more grounded style of gameplay when you were playing as the Marine, to flying in low orbit and fighting Covenant cruisers with the ability to turn yourself into a missile and target specific parts of the ships when you became the Promethean. Of course though, the game was cancelled, and when it was, Joe Staten, Paul Bertone and Mike Wu, who were the lead developers on it, took the grounded style of gameplay that they'd made for the Marines and applied that to Halo 3 ODST, which was literally made from the ruins of Halo Chronicles. But those ruins were also repurposed for something else as well, which we're gonna come to soon. The Halo MMO. So around a similar era, Ensemble Studios, who made Age of Empires and would later make Halo Wars, and long may they rest in peace, were also working on a project called Halo Titan, which was going to be a Halo MMO. And the art for this thing is fucking ridiculous, to put it lightly. Some of the art looks relatively normal, actually really cool to be honest with you, very in line with like post-Halo 2 Halo aesthetics. And then there are the Scions, the Rogues, the Hardlight Machetes, Demons, and God knows what else. The art for this thing completely jumped the shark. As for the gameplay, it was more of a World of Warcraft style MMO than like a RuneScape style MMO, which is my absolute, like, my god, that game is the crutch of my existence. I've been playing it for 21 years and I show no signs of stopping, so I probably wouldn't have been all that interested in this game. Unfortunately, there's no actual gameplay footage of it out there, but trust me, if any ever leaks, then I will be covering it first and foremost, so if you aren't subbed yet, make sure you're subbed in case that eventuality ever comes to pass. Of course though, once Titan was cancelled, Ensemble Studios went on to making Halo Wars, before being shut down a month before the game released by Microsoft, which is really scummy, yet another reason to hate Microsoft. I Love Bees. So I Love Bees was Halo 2's incredibly famous ARG marketing campaign that involved the story of an AI being sent from the Halo universe back to our modern day, which at the time was 2004, that involved players going around doing loads of weird stuff in real life to solve it and to get the next steps. It was first teased in the Halo 2 announcement video with a link to ilovebees.com flickering on screen, which led to a beekeeping website that acted as the surface of the iceberg, shall we say, that was the story of I Love Bees. And funnily enough, among the cast of actors who were in I Love Bees was, weirdly, Rami Malek. So yes, Elliot Alderson from Mr. Robot, or Freddie Mercury from the Queen biopic a few years ago. Yep, the first major thing, as far as I'm aware, that he was in was Halo, but not a Halo game or a Halo movie or a Halo commercial. He was in I Love Bees, which is quite insane. I have walked among men and angels for 3,000 years. Now, this refers to the reverse speech that's hidden in the Destroyer's Invocation section of Mausoleum Suite from Halo 2's soundtrack, and for years, people believed that this speech belonged to Mendicant Bias, but recently, Marty confirmed that that wasn't the case. So then we start to think that it might be a cryptic retelling of the biblical story of Cain and Abel, given that a lot of the lines in Destroyer's Invocation aligned almost perfectly with Cain and Abel. But again, Marty confirmed that that wasn't the case either, in a comment that read, "I love you all. I've talked about Professor Moriarty and who buried Paul once before. The key is the creators." Which is a reference to a famous talk given by Professor Brian Moriarty in 1999 about a semi-well-known conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney actually died in 1967 and that the Beatles hid tons of hints towards that in all of their future songs. Now, as far as we know, that theory is not actually true. Or so we think. But the idea with the talk and also with the theory is that it's meant to illustrate how from even the smallest of details, fans will create stories that just take on a life of their own. But the key is the creators is the only real hint that Marty gave in that comment. And then, in another comment, he asks, who are the creators? What was their purpose? What did they create? Did they succeed? All incredibly cryptic and frankly leaves us with more questions than answers. The true meaning of all of these words remains entirely unknown. All meaning aside though, how these words sound and also the words themselves are pretty creepy, especially given how broad and sweeping they are, and also the point in Halo's timeline in which they were released. Back then, we had no idea who this entity could ever be, nor who or what they were actually alluding to. Buying 343 pizza. So when 343 were initially teasing MCC coming to PC, which by the way was like one of the biggest deals in the history of the entire franchise if you weren't there, some guy on Reddit said that if it was announced, he'd buy pizza for the first 343 employee who commented on his post, and Sketch actually did. At this time, the idea of Halo coming to PC just seemed like a ridiculous pipe dream, but here was Sketch commenting on that post. Then, on the day that the announcement was rumoured to be made, Sketch tweeted a pizza emoji, which sent fans absolutely ballistic. And then when the game was announced, we all followed through. Because Halo coming to Steam was such a pipe dream for so long, we quite literally bombarded 343 Studio with pizzas, so much so that they actually had to tweet out telling people to stop sending pizza because they received too much. I still remember that night so well. We actually managed to crash Little Caesars website by bombarding it with so many orders, like legitimate traffic and legitimate orders to send to 343's offices. Man, that was a legendary moment. Next time you see someone try and argue that the fans never gave 343 a chance or something along those lines, just remind them of the pizza incident, because it's like one of the most wholesome things I think I've ever seen come out of Halo, ever. And it really proves that Halo fans aren't this ridiculously unsatisfiable group of people who would just hate on everything that 343 or Halo Studios do. The Didact dies in a comic. So yeah, the Didact didn't actually die at the end of Halo 4, he was in fact teleported to Installation 03, Gamma Halo, where he had another face-off with Chief and Blue Team this time, before being composed, despite the fact that it was explicitly stated that the Didact can't be composed, he's immune to the composer, but they just hit him with like 5 composers at once, which apparently overrided that immunity, so yay. Thankfully, they not retconned, but changed the ending of this and kind of nullified it a little bit by having the Didact come back in Halo Epitaph, which was a great send-off for his story about his passage into the domain. But man, like, the Didact for me remains probably the most wasted character in all of Halo's lore. Killing him at the end of Halo 4 was stupid. Killing him in a comic was even dumber. At least Epitaph was good. Cloaked Master Chief. In the now iconic teaser for Halo 5, Master Chief walks through the desert of what appears to be the Ark in a cloak, giving him one of his coolest looks ever. This look then reappeared in loads of Halo 5 concept art, depicting a much darker, much more clandestine story than the obvious garbage that we ended up getting. I truly hope that we can get this kind of punished Chief look for a game in the future. I mean, if Halo Studios can resurrect the zombie Didact Halo 5 concept for a book, then my god, they can resurrect cloaked punished Chief. Just please, okay, please, for the love of God, if you're gonna do that, Halo Studios, don't do it for a book, do it in a game, for the love of God. Stop doing cool shit in books instead of games. The Noble 14. At midnight on April 15, 2010, Microsoft officially shut down the servers for Halo 2, and the Noble 14 denotes the 14 individuals who were the last to stay online beyond the servers going offline. As long as people remained signed in, they could still matchmake. So, loads of people stayed online for as long as possible, and the Noble 14 were the ones who held out the longest, with the king of the Noble 14 being Apache Nazir, who managed to stay online for almost an entire month, finally being booted offline at 1:58 AM on May 11th, almost an entire month after the servers were originally turned off. For almost 24 hours, Apache Nazir was the last person on planet Earth to be signed in to Halo 2, which, you know, when you think about it, has a kind of weird liminal sensation to it. Humans are Prometheans. To create the Prometheans, the Didact needed the composed essence of a biological being. Initially, he composed his own Promethean warrior servants, hence why they're called the Prometheans, but as the Flood's consumption of foreigner space only ever got faster and more aggressive, more drastic measures were taken. He took his composer to Omega Halo and composed every innocent prehistoric human that the librarian had safely kept there to create an army of Prometheans, and even still, the parasite proved too strong. The Janus Key. The Janus Key was a core part of the story of Spartan Ops and Halo Escalation, and it was basically this foreign artifact that was made up of 2 parts, and when you combine the 2 parts, it revealed the location of every single foreign artifact in the galaxy. So basically, a luminary on steroids. Its design was also based on this bit of the Mantle of Responsibility logo as well, which it fits perfectly in with, which, by the way, was absolutely not a coincidence. Drone Sniper. So the drones were originally concepted for Halo 4, and among many cool ideas that they had for them, including a Drone Queen boss fight, they also ideated the Drone Sniper. 343 obviously wanted to find a way to one-up Halo 2's Jackal snipers, but I think it's best for our sanity that that never happened. A Fistful of Arrows. A Fistful of Arrows is, of course, June's face tattoo, but it also refers to a fan story that was written by Levi Hofmeyr in October 2010, depicting June's story on Reach directly after he departs Noble. It begins as he leaves Noble Team with Halsey, and follows his escort journey with her to Castle Base, and then ends with him disappearing into the fog of Reach. Not only is the story and the art absolutely incredible, but it's also kind of seen as like half canon by both Bungie and Halo Studios. It's not fully official canon, but at one point it was in the process of being officially canonized, which ended up not happening, and now it's kind of stuck in canon limbo. Levi is an awesome artist though, and he actually did very recently do some incredible art for Halo officially. In the encyclopedia, he did a load of the art for Offensive Bias, which I absolutely love, so hopefully this connection allows them to actually canonize Fistful of Arrows at some point in the future. Link to go and read it is down in the description. 2401 Penitent Tangent on Backwash Implication. So floating around Backwash is Delta Halo's rampant monitor 2401 Penitent Tangent, but given that it's highly likely that Backwash is located above cold storage, which was the source of Delta Halo's aggressive flood outbreak, you could infer that something down there, that something being the Gravemind, corrupted Tangent and is the reason that the flood was able to fester for so long. Just a theory though, there's no hard canon for that. Microsoft Sam.
Microsoft Sam is the legendary Microsoft text-to-speech voice that was used to voice Chief in RBN, the Chief.
What the hell was that?
One kick-ass wedding.
I can't believe you.
That was some funny-ass shit.
You know, that actually was kinda funny. You wanna do it again?
Damn right, son. And as a result was present in a billion different Halo videos back in the day. Bungie even hid a Microsoft Sam Easter egg in Halo 3. JNC Paul, we're so totally fired.
The Halo 3 terminals. The terminals of Halo 3 are secret Forerunner terminals that you find on the Ark, the Covenant, and Halo that tell a litany of stories. From battle reports of the Forerunners' war with the Flood, to tales of certain individuals either fighting the war or trying to prepare for the firing of the Halos, but my favourite is Mendicant Bias's story of corruption, salvation, and interference in Chief's journey. Both the stories of the terminals, but also how those stories are told, really scratch that kind of grand conspiracy beyond the veil itch that I always yearn for with stories. A little detail that I love when you're scrolling through the terminals, these ancient, advanced constructs, is that for how sci-fi they look, they still make mechanical sounds like modern or even old computers, which in a weird way really grounds them. Something about these terminals always reminded me of Lost. Finding these ancient terminals at this distant, ancient, mysterious location left by our ancestors and containing countless strange data entries about what happened here with our ancestors feels so similar to finding the hatch and discovering all of the old technology within. If you don't know, Lost is like a core part of my kind of interest in any sort of storytelling or fiction. It's where I get a lot of my interest in conspiracy theories from, and Halo 3's terminals just feel so Lost coded to me, which makes me love them even more. Last year, I made what, at least I think, is a really good and really immersive video going through the story of all of the terminals, so definitely go and check that bad boy out, link down below. The Rookie's real name. In the newest Halo Encyclopedia, which released in 2022, it was revealed that the Rookie's actual name is John Doherty. Now, I despise the fact that they killed the Rookie off in a book, but I will say this name for the Rookie is actually perfect. John Doherty is like an extension of John Doe, which is of course the placeholder name that you give someone whose name that you don't know, which fits really well with him being the silent protagonist that the player is meant to implant their own personality onto. Colouring book confirms the Didact is alive. Yep, the name of this one kinda just says it all. It's not a joke, this actually happened. So in 2017, 343 released a Halo adult colouring book with a page dedicated to the Didact that had some lore that suggested following Halo escalation, the Didact was trapped within the domain, which was a plot thread that wouldn't be picked up again for another 7 years until Halo Epitaph. Pretty stupid way to reveal such a major plot detail, to be honest. Map lore. This refers to what I think is the often rather slept on lore for multiplayer maps. So multiplayer maps that you've played hundreds, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of times have really cool backstories to them to really ground and cement the locations that you're actually playing on, such as Cold Storage is where the outbreak on Delta Halo that led to the creation of the first Gravemind in 100,000 years began. Epitaph is essentially the headstone above the burial site of Mendicant Bias, the AI responsible for the Foreigner's firing of the Halos after he sided with the Flood. Sandtrap is home to a mysterious and potentially rather creepy secret, buried beneath its sands, and so on. A few years ago, I actually made, I thought, a really good video series going into the lore behind all of the maps in Halo 1 through to Halo 4, so definitely check that bad boy out. Monitor's Garland. This was some kind of artifact that was present in a very early version of Halo 2's script. It was something obviously pertaining to the Monitor, to Guilty Spark, that the Arbiter would seize from him when he was in the presence of Tartarus as well, so I assume at the end of the Oracle. Now, a garland in real life is a decorative braid of some kind, so I guess the Monitor's Garland was like a Foreigner equivalent of that? Who knows? The Gargoyle. Infamously hidden within the Foreigner Spire on the creepy Halo 2 map Backwash is a gargoyle, although it's actually not a gargoyle. Technically, this is a grotesque because for it to be a gargoyle, it has to have water flowing through it, which this doesn't. Either way, I always take this as a little subtle hint that foreigners secretly loved medieval Gothic architecture. A pipe dream of mine is to see a crossover between the Foreigner's typical brutalist architecture and that medieval Gothic style of architecture. A guy can dream. Linda hidden in Halo 1. So at the end of the Fall of Reach, Linda is gravely wounded by a plasma pistol bolt to the chest. But instead of calling her dead, even though her vitals were essentially flatlined, they said that she was MIA and put her in a cryotube on the Autumn beside his chief that was bound for, obviously, Alpha Halo. The idea was that in cryo she'd be suspended so she wouldn't fully die, and that she'd be able to stay in that until they found some kind of medical assistance to hopefully revive her and save her. But when the Covenant boarded the Autumn in Halo 1, her cryopod was ejected into space and she wasn't picked up again until the end of Halo 1 / the start of First Strike. And in Halo 1 Anniversary, 343 hid a nice little Easter egg to that on this board near the cryo room. You can see next to Chief's pod, there's a section for Linda, who is red because she's been ejected from the ship. Hopefully in the Halo 1 remake that should be coming out next year, we can actually see Linda in the Autumn and also see her get ejected. That would be one of those little details that'd be really cool to add to bring Halo 1 more in line with the books. Just think about that, 343 or Halo Studios. Shadow of Intent. This, of course, refers to two separate things. Number one, Artas Vadum's ship, which is also the flagship of the Swords of Sanghelios fleet, or, primarily for today, a really cool band whose name is based on the iconic ship, and whose first two albums are both named after Halo entities, Primordial and Reclaimer, on which the songs are named and inspired by elements of Halo's lore, specifically the Foreigner trilogy. This isn't the last band we're going to be talking about today, but Shadow of Intent are an awesome band with an even more awesome source of inspiration. True OGs. Firefly and Serenity. And finally for tier 3, we have the show Firefly and the movie Serenity, of which Bungie were huge fans of, because not only are the movie and TV show referenced en masse by Marine dialogue in the original trilogy, but also about 60% of Alpha 9 were played by lead actors of the show and the movie. Book is of course played by Nathan Fillion, who was the lead in Firefly and Serenity, Captain Malcolm Reynolds. Mickey is played by Alan Tudyk, who played Wash in Firefly, and Dutch was played by Adam Baldwin, who played Jane Cobb in also Firefly and Serenity as well. Firefly is really worth a watch. It's a really good early 2000s space western with heavy Cowboy Bebop vibes that follows a bunch of renegades getting into trouble across the galaxy. Highly worth watching, especially if you love Halo. So kicking off tier 4, we have District 9. And although this of course isn't a Halo movie, it has deep ties to Halo. District 9 is a really grounded sci-fi movie by Neil Blomkamp, based around an alien invasion / settlement on Earth where, very long story short, the main protagonist ends up slowly morphing into one of the aliens, growing a prawn arm as they're called, and becoming more sympathetic towards them in the process. Now, I'm a massive Neil Blomkamp fan and I love District 9, but the reason that I and every other Halo fan loves this movie isn't just because of that, but rather it's because it was made from the ruins of Neil and Peter Jackson's Halo movie. There are some Halo crossovers, like for example the Denel NTW-20, which is the sniper rifle that inspired Halo, is used in the movie, although to be fair, that is the South African military sniper rifle, which is where the movie's shot, so could be why, but the main inspiration was the story. Of course, the story is about the character Vikas and his arm becoming a prawn arm after he interacts with some prawn tech. And what was the story of Halo Chronicles that Peter Jackson and Joe Staten were working on? Yep, it was the story of a Marine who finds foreign attack and his arm slowly morphs into a Promethean arm before his entire body becomes a Promethean, just like Vikas becoming a prawn. Apparently as well, Marty said that Joe Staten has trouble watching this movie because so much of it is repurposed from the game that he was working on, which, yeah, I understand. Elysium. But Neil Blomkamp's Halo references didn't stop with District 9. His next movie was Elysium, led by Matt Damon and Jodie Foster, which released in 2013, 4 years after District 9, and featured a literal Halo ring in the final act. The idea was that this ring was a habit for the elite and the powerful to escape the slums of Earth, but I mean, it was literally a Halo ring. Look at it, it's a Halo ring. It's very clear that Neil Blomkamp was and still is a Halo fan, and given that his main bulk of actual released Halo work was Halo Landfall, which is still the best live action Halo of all time, why haven't Halo Studios handed him the keys to a Halo show or movie yet? It is the way they work over there, directing stuff like that, is beyond parody, but I'm gonna tone myself down and move on to the next entry. The Cortana Letters. The Cortana Letters are the oldest piece of Halo lore in existence, created before anyone even knew who or what Cortana was. They were strings of egotistical rants from a clearly rampant AI that were written in the style of Durandal's rampancy induced through ego-driven rants in Marathon, and emailed to users of marathon.bungie.org in February 1999. I've done an entire video breaking down the letters in extensive detail, link in the description, but just know that on their own, the letters aren't canon, but they are canon whenever they're reused, and they've basically all been reused now in various bits of Halo lore, from Halo 3 to Halo Infinite and Halo Epitaph, so they're almost entirely canon now, but in their context of how they were used in Halo, not altogether. Either way, they're a really cool window into an ultimate version of Halo's story, where Bungie were going to have Cortana go down the metastable route of rampancy in Halo 1. Which, by the way, no, is not the same kind of rampancy that she had in Halo 4 and Halo 5. That's completely different, and if anything, is a misinterpretation of what rampancy means, but that's a whole different topic for a whole different day. Humans are Forerunner. This one is very straightforward. It refers to the fact that during the entirety of Bungie's tenure with Halo, and also the beginning of 343's tenure, humans were Forerunner. But when the Forerunner trilogy and Halo 4 released, this was retconned to humans being an entirely different species called the Ancient Humans, who were the Forerunners' rivals. But it was also said that the Forerunners and the Ancient Humans came from the same population billions of years ago, so they were still related, just way further down the line, and it did damage a lot of the original story, or a lot of the implications from the original story. Some people like to dispute the fact that humans were foreigners, and there's loads of excuses people make up for it, but at the end of the day, it's just not the case. Like, you do some actual research, like I did for a video last year into this topic, and you really look at all the implications and the hints that Bungie were putting out in their stories, and it's very obvious that the humans were literally foreigner. The video that I made last year, I think personally, is the best video that I've ever made. I was really happy with it, so if you're interested in this topic, I'd suggest going and watching that video, link down below. But either way, whatever your interpretation of this whole thing is, it's a really fascinating topic to dive into. My Chemical Romance Halo 3. So among many bands of the early noughties, Halo and My Chemical Romance are just intrinsically linked. There are 1,000,000,001 240p Halo 3 montages to Black Parade or Helena, but this entry actually goes far deeper than that. It refers to a video that, unfortunately, I cannot for the life of me find that was on MCR's channel, like, even a year ago, that must have been deleted or something, of the 4 of them playing Halo 3 split screen, I remember specifically on high ground, backstage during the Black Parade tour. From what I remember, they were even in the Black Parade clothes. This right here is the closest video that I could find to this video that I'm actually talking about, with Frank Lero unboxing an original Xbox, which must have been in like 2004 during the Sweet Revenge tour. And man, if this video isn't peak 2004, then I don't know what is. I really hope that video is not lost media, so if you happen to know where it is, then let me know. Nova. Nova, or Near Orbit Vanguard Alliance, is a certified Halo classic. This thing was the mobile FPS game back in like 2009, 2010, and clearly it was very heavily inspired by Halo, so much so that everyone just called it a Halo ripoff, even though it kind of wasn't. For the most part, it looked like a mobile FPS of the time, but you know, it was actually quite impressive that something like this could run on a mobile phone and was complete with a campaign, but also internet and Bluetooth supported multiplayer as well. Nova was actually a really big game as well. I didn't realize how successful it was until I did research for this video. And I mean, even anecdotally, I remember playing it on my iPhone 3G back in like 2009, and I remember everyone else at school had it as well, but everyone was also talking about how it was obviously a Halo ripoff. They actually ended up making a trilogy for Nova, and some of the games, I think the first one, even got ported to the PSP and the PS3. The datapads. The datapads were Reach's equivalent to Halo 3's terminals, hidden all across the campaign levels across normal and legendary difficulties. They told the story of an unknown and rather schizophrenic hacker who, in hacking into Oni, accidentally stumbled across what is essentially Halo's version of the Illuminati, a group of incredibly secretive and clandestine AIs called the Assembly, who for hundreds of years had been secretly guiding the course of humanity from the shadows like puppeteers. The story of the datapads is actually really creepy, and it shines a whole new light on the story of Reach and realistically the whole story of Halo, to be honest with you. And luckily for you, I happen to have made, again, what I think might be a pretty good video, quite an immersive one, going into the story of the datapads, so link to that is down below. Green Day Halo song. So, back to band-related Halo lore. Back during Halo 2, when Bungie were fielding a mainstream band to make a song for Halo 2, Green Day made an entire song that was meant to be in the game and on the soundtrack. But Nile Rodgers, who was working with C. Paul Johnson, Michael Salvatore, and of course Marty O'Donnell on the soundtrack, said that although the song was good, it was too much for Halo. And so, they went with Blow Me Away by Breaking Benjamin instead. And man, there's so much to unpack there. Firstly, the fact that Nile Rodgers worked on Halo 2's soundtrack is just insane to me. The guy is a bona fide musical legend, and the fact that he was just sat in the studio with Marty and Michael and C. Paul just casually cooking up the greatest video game soundtrack of all time is quite mind-blowing. But the elephant in the room, the fact that Green Day's first major song released after American Idiot was going to be a song for Halo 2 is mind-blowing. I mean, I've been a huge fan of Green Day most of my life. I think American Idiot was probably when I got into them. In fact, it was the first album that I ever bought, and very weirdly, I found the disc this morning. Some kind of cosmic alignment caused that. I found this morning, like 3-4 hours ago. That was the first album that I ever bought in New York in 2005, right? This is not the full album, but you know what I mean. Cool to mention that. And the fact that oh my god, they were going to make a song for Halo 2. That I really, really hope that at some point they release that for whatever reason. I'd also love to get Billy, Trey, and Mike on a video as well to discuss that. So if any of you guys are watching, Billy, Trey, Mike, please hit me up. I'd love to talk. Let's talk about some Halo. Albert Wesker in Halo 1. This is just a fun little Easter egg, but I wanted to give it its own entry because, like, beyond Halo, Resident Evil is like my second biggest hyperfixation in gaming, so I had to mention it. When 343 started adding skins to MCC, one of the first ones that they added was an Albert Wesker Samurai Edge themed skin for the Halo 1 Magnum. The Samurai Edge is an incredibly famous pistol from Resident Evil, a really uniquely coloured custom Beretta 92 FS, and to see its unique paint job replicated on an M6D of all choices was just perfection. I love this thing so much, and I love whoever it was at 343 who decided to add it. And also, funnily enough, Wesker has another bit of involvement in Halo. So in Alex Garland's Halo movie script, one of the Marines that charges the silent cartographer beach with you and goes inside the facility was called Wesker. And 28 days later, which was obviously his previous movie before he was going to do Halo, he said was massively inspired by Resident Evil. And clearly, he wanted that Resident Evil inspiration to transcend 28 days and be imparted on Halo as well. Man, he wrote a Halo movie with inspiration taken from 28 Days Later with a nod to Resident Evil in it. I say this with all genuine sincerity. He just like me for real. Sleep Token. Back to bands, another band who are really hot at the moment, Sleep Token, actually have a lot of Halo references in their music as well. They've been known to play renditions of the Halo theme during live shows. They actually only did this a couple weeks ago at Download Festival in the UK. And also, their second album was literally called This Place Will Become Your Tomb, which is of course a reference to Cortana's final quote from Crow's Nest in Halo 3. Oh, and if you're doubting whether that's actually a reference or not, that album also happened to release a day before Halo 3's birthday, so yeah, that's definitely a reference. Hideo Kojima is a Halo fan. But the list of famous Halo appreciators goes beyond just bands. One of my absolute gaming idols, Hideo Kojima, also gave Halo 3 a seal of approval. In 2007, Ryan Payton, who would later go and work on Halo 4, but at the time was working in Tokyo with Kojima on Metal Gear Solid 4, had Halo 3 shipped overnight to the studio when it released so they could play it. But the problem is that Hideo Kojima suffers from really bad motion sickness. So all he did was spawn in on Sierra 117, walk up to a planet, shoot that planet, and then when the planet moved, he simply nodded in affirmation and walked off. Reactive natural environments got the Hideo Kojima seal of approval. Solid Snake. And speaking of Hideo Kojima, his most iconic creation, Iroquois Pliskin, is referenced in Halo. The symbol for the bandana skull, which just so happens to have the effect and description, infinite ammo, is of course a Snake reference.
If you run out of ammo, you can have mine.
You got enough?
Absolutely. Infinite ammo.
But this isn't the only Metal Gear reference in Halo. In Halo Infinite, 343 added a Psycho Mantis reference in the Grunt propaganda towers.
Why can't we kill the chief? It's like he's psychic or something. Wait, I got it. We just gotta plug the controller into player 2. Well, what the hell do you mean there's no plug?
So if you don't know, Psycho Mantis is one of the most iconic Metal Gear boss fights of all time because of just how ingeniously you have to beat him. So he has these telekinetic, psychokinetic abilities where he can hover, and you literally can't shoot him because he can predict your shots and your attacks before you do them. So the way that you beat him is you unplug your controller from the controller port and plug it into a different one, which breaks his telekinesis and allows you to attack him. Trust me, there's a reason that I'm a huge Hideo Kojima fanboy. I mean, not only is this game design absolutely ingenious, but he was doing this in 1998. Insane. The F2000 coincidence. So you've probably noticed that some of the guns in Halo are very clearly inspired by real-life firearms. The BR is obviously inspired by the FAMAS, the Sniper is obviously inspired by the Denel NTW-20, and the AR is obviously inspired by the F2000. Except only the first two of those comparisons are true. The fact that the AR looks really similar to the F2000 happens to be a massive coincidence, and it was confirmed by the legend Rob McLeese, who designed all of Halo's weapons at Bungie. And the dates line up as well. The F2000 was announced at IDEX in March 2001, but had likely been in production for years prior, and the Halo 1 assault rifle has versions going back as far as 1999. So clearly the dates just don't work. Unless FN happened to have spies within Bungie, or unless Rob McLeese was secretly working for them and feeding information to FN to design the F2000, or vice versa, any similarity between the two designs is purely coincidental. They just happen to come up with an almost identical futuristic assault rifle at the exact same time. The Halo Killers. So the Halo Killers were a kind of pseudo-genre of game in the mid to early 2000s that were designed to either dethrone Halo or that people assumed were meant to dethrone Halo. The most infamous Halo killer was of course Ubisoft's Haze, meant to be PlayStation's answer to Halo, which completely flopped when it released. Killzone was another one of PlayStation's attempted clapbacks that didn't fail, but it obviously never came even remotely close to the heights of Bungie's Halo. But the most infamous example of a literal, purpose-built Halo killer was Infinity Ward's, well, Halo Killer. It was literally called that. So after Call of Duty 2 shipped to huge success in 2005, Infinity Ward was split into two teams. One team would work on another World War II COD, and the other team would work on a new project, literally codenamed Halo Killer. Splitting the resources between two teams spread them too thin though, and eventually both of these games were scrapped and the team was reunified to create, of all games, COD 4. The game that truly began COD's ascent to the top of the food chain, and still to this day, one of the best shooters ever made. Now, not too long ago, a build of a secret cut futuristic Call of Duty called NX1 was leaked and is like almost fully playable now, and watching that gameplay really made me wonder what Halo Killer was going to actually play like. I beg one day somebody leaks a build, because I really want to make a video about that. Original Halo 4. This entry refers to 343's original version of Halo 4 that, unlike the pale imitation of Call of Duty that we ended up getting, was actually a fully fledged classic Halo game that was received extremely positively by focus groups who played it. And how did 343 respond to this amazing feedback to their first major creation? They scrapped it! They scrapped the entire thing and made a COD imitation instead. Halo's biblical origins and meanings. Now this is quite a deep one. Of course, the name of the franchise, Halo, implies it, but the religious roots of Halo run very deep. The Ark sheltered surviving species from the Flood. The Covenant, of whom are led by a false prophet, face a great schism. There's a soundtrack piece called Behold a Pale Horse, and so many more. Me and Wendigoon teamed up to do a collab last year covering this topic in decent detail that I thought was a really good video, so go and watch that video if you're more interested. But long story short, almost every major facet of Halo lore has some kind of connection in biblical stories and tales. Stubbs the Zombie. Stubbs the Zombie, Rebel Without a Pulse, is a horror action-adventure game released in 2005 where you play as a zombie called Stubbs in the 1950s going around infecting healthy humans. Cool. What the hell does this have in relation to Halo? Well, Stubbs the Zombie is the only other game ever released that was made on Halo's Blam engine. The game was the first release of the newly founded game studio Wide Load Games, who were founded in 2003 by Alex Seropian, the co-founder of Bungie. And just like that, all of a sudden, Stubbs being the only other game ever made on Blam starts to make a whole lot of sense. Shadowrun. But Stubbs wasn't the only other game to use the Blam engine. So Shadowrun, which was a sort of progenitor to the hero shooter craze, and a game that has a real cult following, was released in 2007 on the 360 and also Windows Vista, made by Facer Interactive, and all the prototyping for Shadowrun was also done on Blam. It's actually really weird looking at these prototypes. They're entirely public, there's loads of videos of them out there, there's beta builds that are out there that you can play, and it just looks like a sort of 2005 core Halo Custom Edition mod. The HUD, the physics, the sound design, loads of other stuff are all very clearly Halo 1. I mean, you can even see Marines running around with katanas for God's sake. It really does just look like a glorified Custom Edition mod. As far as we know, Stubbs the Zombie and Shadowrun were the only other games to ever use Blam in any way, and obviously with Halo moving to Unreal now, I have a feeling they might be the only other games to use Blam. Which Halo is Tempest on? The first DLC for Halo Reach brought us a map called Tempest, which was actually the only other map in the game at that point, besides Forge World, that was set on a Halo ring. The lore for the map is that a UNSC longsword crashes on the installation besides a bunch of its weather vanes, or weather control towers, whatever they're called. But the big question is, which Halo ring actually is this? Well, it's never actually revealed. The likely option would probably be Alpha Halo, and that this longsword was part of a detachment that was with the Pillar of Autumn, but we don't know. Given that this map was released in Reach, which obviously has no Halo ring in it, and that it was originally meant to release in Halo 3, in which the only Halo ring you go to is the incomplete installation 04B, there really aren't any indications or hints as to where this ring or which ring this could be. So unless we randomly get some more information about the setting of Tempest, we're just gonna have to keep guessing. Trigate and Requiem for a Dream. Welcome to the certified HUD classic of all certified HUD classics. The Trigate is one of the most infamous Halo conspiracy theories of all time, originating in Halo 2. If you skip to the end of Delta Halo and jump into the geometry of Regret, you will see a button floating in the middle of the lake, a noticeably human-themed button, on a Halo ring. And if you manage to get close to it, its activation tooltip says hold X to open gate. Now realistically, all this is the switch for the gondola on Regret, that because the map actually hasn't loaded properly because you skipped the trigger point to load the map, the gondola and also the button haven't actually loaded properly yet, and so it's loaded a placeholder button which just so happens to be human. But back in the noughties, man, back in the mid-2000s, people were adamant that there was a far deeper and far darker and creepier meaning behind this button. Enter Requiem for a Dream. So the video that dominated Google videos and also early YouTube about the Trigate was framed in a really creepy fashion, as if there was some grand Illuminati tier secret hidden within Halo 2 that the US government didn't want you to find, or some ridiculous stuff like that, and it all revolved around the Trigate. But like many conspiracy theory videos back in the day, the soundtrack to this video was the soundtrack to Requiem for a Dream, which is a really powerful and really striking, I'm not sure what the exact word is for it, it's a great piece of music and it really builds the conspiracy vibe. It had this kind of hair-raising aura that really did make you think there was some grand conspiracy hidden within Halo 2 that nobody was ever meant to find. Of course, I can't play any of it in this video because of copyright, but trust me, you owe it to yourself to go and watch the original video because thankfully it's still up. You know, as Sergeant Johnson wouldn't have said,
this stuff is your history. It should remind you, Grunts, what we're fighting to protect.
Liminal spaces. Sticking with an entry of a similar kind of creepiness, liminal spaces have become a massive thing on the internet in recent years thanks to the backrooms, and they've also spread into gaming as well. Liminal spaces in gaming typically stem from empty multiplayer maps, wandering around play spaces designed for loads of players that once upon a time were brimming with countless real people all having the time of their lives, but now are entirely deserted, almost frozen in time with nothing populating them besides the subtle ambience that you were never really meant to hear. It's such a weird and kind of disassociating feeling, and in this age of nostalgia that we're in now, it really doesn't surprise me that something like this has really caught on. Anyways, as if it wasn't already crazy obvious, this entry refers to the fact that walking around old empty Halo maps invokes the same kind of feelings as liminal spaces. I'm sure most of you have tried this before, but if you haven't, just one day log into Halo and boot up an old Halo 1 BTB map, for example, on your own in a custom game, and just wander around it for 10 minutes, just listen to the ambience and just soak in the actual aura of the map on its own, because it is a really weird, creepy feeling. It does feel very liminal. Mandela effects. An equally weird kind of effect that's also gotten pretty popular in recent years is the Mandela effect, which is the idea of a kind of widely believed false memory or misconception about something. And of course, Halo is no stranger to this effect. General Kid made a really good video going over a bunch of Halo Mandela effects a few years ago, but some striking examples are the fact that you could never play Halo 2's The Armory in co-op, even in original Halo 2, the fact that it was never actually called Armor Lock, but rather Armor Lockup, and the fact that the dying elite at the start of Uprising never moved when he talks. Only a few there, but it's kind of hard to talk about Mandela effects because they're quite a personal thing. Like, for me, I always knew that elite never spoke, but I've seen people saying like, oh no, I remember that elite being animated in OG Halo 2. Mandela effects are a real personal thing, so if you have any Halo Mandela effects of your own, then leave them down in the comments. The Hurricane Ivan incident. So this one was pretty insane, but in a very dangerous way. So back in 2004, during the Isle of Bees ARG for Halo 2 that we touched on earlier, one of the parts of the ARG had players going to payphones in the real world that would ring, and they'd pick up the phone and answer a call from an operator who would deliver them information to access one of the axons that was part of the story. So of course, fans were going crazy all across the country hunting down these payphones and rushing to them to answer calls from the operators. But there was something else that was going on in the US at the time that was way crazier than answering phones. Hurricane Ivan, a major devastating hurricane that wreaked havoc across the southern US, causing $26 billion of damage and 124 fatalities. But this didn't stop Halo fans. One fan went to one of the payphones in the middle of the hurricane and answered it, and when he did, the actor on the other side who was playing the operator broke character and said, "Dude, it's a hurricane, put the phone down." I know as Halo fans we're all incredibly unsatiated right now, have been for a while, but I don't think we're quite unsatiated enough just yet to go answering payphones in the middle of a hurricane. The Sharkoi/Drinial. The Sharkoi, or Drinial, are a famously cut but now canon species in Halo that actually predate Halo as an IP. These things began life as the Hulks in Marathon 1, and given all of its Marathon inspiration, Bungie planned to add them to Halo 1 as a species called the Drinial, but they were cut. They then tried to add them again with Halo 2, this time under the name Sharkoi, but again they were cut from the game. However, they were kept in the canon, albeit rather loosely, in an offhand mention in Halo 2's Conversations from the Universe booklet that came with the limited edition. But then in 2017, they were officially reintroduced into the canon by 343 in Halo Envoy, where it turned out they were once used by the Foreigners as specialised anti-flood units, before being weaponised by the Banished and subsequently nuked by Grey Team. But don't worry, there are still plenty of Sharkoi out there in the galaxy, and I pray to God that Halo 7 is finally the Halo game that introduces them as an enemy in the games, because man, they're a quarter century late at this point. Been waiting for them for 25 years, it's about time. Lost Master Chief's Screamer video. So Screamer videos were a huge thing in the early noughties and the kind of early popularized era of the internet. They were the first kind of major troll to pop up that really transcended into real life because they terrify you in real life. And no surprise, there were also Halo Screamers out there that existed. However, there's this one specific Master Chief Screamer video that a bunch of people all seem to collectively remember, but that nobody seems to be able to find anymore. And the posts that I've found about this are all very recent. We're not talking like 15, 20 years ago, we're talking like 5 years ago people were looking for this and remembering it collectively, but were unable to find it. According to one of these posts, the video was called Master Chief Without Helmet Real. And it began with the Starry Night trailer, and then right after Eddie Bloom says,
"Do you think we'll ever meet them?"
The Screamer image appears of some kind of doll, possibly made of clay, of a demon or a gargoyle with either red eyes or no eyes angrily facing the camera. Very weird description. Now, it's highly likely that the original uploader of this video in like 2006 or 2007 or 2008 has since purged his channel and with it has deleted the Screamer video, thus making it lost media and explaining why nobody seems to be able to find it. Either that, or it's yet another case of a Halo Mandela effect and the video never even existed in the first place. Steve Jobs. And finally for tier 4, we have Steve Jobs, the man who technically was the one who revealed Halo to the world. At Macworld 1999, Jason Jones took to the stage with Steve Jobs to announce the Apple Mac's hit new game, Halo.
And so I'm very happy to welcome on the stage Jason Jones, who is the co-founder of Bungie and the Halo project lead. Halo is the name of this game, and we're going to see, for the first time, Halo.
Bungie at the time was signed to release the game on Mac, as they had done with Marathon some years prior, but eventually, of course, Xbox swooped in, bought out Bungie, and the rest is history. I still find it crazy that of all the people who could have revealed Halo, it was Steve Jobs. That's like such a crazy alien crossover that my brain just can't wrap itself around. Very cool though, I will say. Okay, so with costume change number 2 out of the way, that brings us down to tier 5, Midnight Facility, and I figured now that we're getting into the proper spooky stuff, I would put on the spookiest shirt that I own, which just so happens to be a shirt by one of the best bands of all time, good old-fashioned Deftones. Shout out to all the Deftones fans watching. So, starting out tier 5, we have the Transmissions. So, the Transmissions are a series of official Bungie-made stories, I guess, that I have never seen anyone talk about until recently. They've existed for 25 years, they predate even Halo 1, and until I randomly stumbled across them last year and made a video about them, I'd never seen a single person discuss them. They were released on Bungie.net sometime in the year 2000, and the page that they were posted on has since been lost to time. And they're essentially a series of very short transmissions, of course, and/or conversations between UNSC and Covenant ships. There isn't really much to discuss about these transmissions because they're just like a bunch of provoking one-liners. They aren't really that deep and there's not really any story to them. But like I said earlier, shock horror, your boy has already done a video diving into all of them in great detail. The link to that is of course down below. Linkin Park Halo Song. Now, Linkin Park are obviously one of the most legendary bands of all time. I actually got to see them a few weeks ago live at Wembley in front of 100,000 people. And Jesus Christ almighty, if you ever get the opportunity, you need to go and see them live. Either way though, as if you already didn't love Linkin Park enough, well, they're massive Halo fans. So in 2010, they released a bunch of B-sides and demos that never made it onto any of their albums, and they stemmed from their most recent album at the time, A Thousand Suns, all the way back to their original album, Zero, right? And on these B-sides was a track called Halo, which a few years ago on stream, Mike Shinoda confirmed was meant to be on Meteora. Now, I can't play it for obvious reasons, but I highly suggest you go and listen to it. Unfortunately, the video is AI generated, which looks like trash. It was during a weird era where they were trying to do some AI stuff, but the actual track itself is incredible. Not only does it sound like pure early noughties Linkin Park, but it also sounds really Halo-y, specifically like really in line with Halo 2's vibe in a way that I can't quite describe, but you'll definitely pick up on it when you listen to it. Mike did say that the track wasn't actually made for Halo, so even though Meteora came out around the time that Green Day and Breaking Benjamin were making tracks for Halo 2, it actually wasn't made for Bungie for Halo 2, it's just that the band were playing a ton of Halo back then at the same time that they were making the songs for Meteora, so they thought they'd make a track that was almost an homage to Halo. Even still though, there is some real Halo inspiration in this song. I mean, hell, they were also even known to host mini tournaments backstage with bands that they were touring with. Like, there's one famous example of them beating Story of the Year in a mini tournament. They also held a pre-release Halo 3 tournament versus their fans as well, which I think was officially endorsed and supported by Bungie, which is really cool. Another famous person, kind of pipe dream here, but I would love to get Mike Shinoda on a video at some point to discuss Halo and maybe even talk about his track Halo, which was made in homage to Halo back in the day. So Mike, if you happen to be watching this video, please hit me up, let's talk some Halo. Tom Cruise and Julia Roberts. Going beyond famous musicians, a lot of famous actors have some really weird ties to Halo as well. Of course, everyone knows that Zac Efron and Tom Hardy were sighted at midnight releases of Halo 3 and Halo Reach respectively, but the connections go way deeper than just a celebrity going to a midnight release. So, did you know that in Halo 2, the Master Chief was almost recast as Tom Cruise and Cortana was almost recast as Julia Roberts? When Hollywood caught wind of just how cataclysmically big Halo 1 was, various Hollywood agents went to Marty O'Donnell to try and pitch their A-listers for roles in Halo 2. Specifically, Tom Cruise's agent pitched Cruise as Chief, and Julia Roberts' agent pitched her as Cortana. But of course, Marty shot the idea down, in part because of just how much he respected Steve Downes and Jen Taylor, but also because he genuinely believed that a lot of Halo 1's success was down to their performances in the game, which, you know, I agree. Pretty crazy to be able to say that you shot down Tom Cruise and Julia Roberts, I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty cool thing to be able to say that you've done, but I'm very happy that you did. Steve Downes and Jen Taylor for life. The Bungieverse. The Bungieverse is a very long-running theory that, in fact, is so old that it more than likely outdates most of the people watching this video, that suggests that there's some kind of intrinsic narrative connection between all of Bungie's games. Specifically, it suggests that Pathways into Darkness, Myth, Marathon, Oni, Halo, and Destiny are all part of the same universe. Now, again, no surprise, I have a rather long video going into this theory in much more detail, but the shorthand version is, in Pathways into Darkness, under the orders of President Bill Clinton, you and a team of US Army Special Forces head into a Mayan temple and destroy a waking god known as the Workenkakenta hidden within using a nuke. This Workenkakenta is the same omnipotent primordial entity that is imprisoned within the sun in Marathon, who you spend the end of Marathon 2 and then the entirety of Marathon Infinity trying to neutralize. In Marathon, you play as a Mjolnir Mark IV cyborg, designated Mjolnir Recon 54, and in Halo, you play as a Mjolnir Mark V cyborg, of course the Master Chief. In Marathon, there also exists a terror group known as Mida, based on Mars. And in Destiny, there are two guns named Mida Multitool and Mida Minitool, with in-game lore that is a direct entry in Marathon's lore. In Destiny, you can find a cryotube of sorts, and when you inspect it, your ghost says that it contains a guardian with exceptional light, who's been in there for centuries and wishes to remain sleeping. The last war that he fought was enough for 1,000 lifetimes. Of course, in reference to the Master Chief. Now that is just the tip of the iceberg of the Bungieverse theory. See what I did there? But I think you get the picture. There's also this kind of overarching theory / idea as well called the Eternal Hero theory that basically suggests that the soul that inhabits the main character of every Bungie game is essentially the same soul reincarnated into different universes. And this is in part true because the idea with that theory is that the soul is the player. Most of Bungie's protagonists are silent or mostly silent protagonists that exist for the player to impart their own personality onto, and thus your soul is inhabiting the soul of every single Bungie protagonist, thus kind of making you the eternal hero. That pretty much sums it up, but if you're interested in going further into that theory, then like I said, my video is down in the description. The Infinite Loop Theory. This is another lore-related theory that I actually came up with many years ago, funnily enough, off the back of Mob of the Dead's Easter egg, the Infinite Cycle Theory. So the idea with this theory is that the Halo universe is stuck in an infinite cycle perpetuated by the Flood, and that the only way to break the cycle is to not just beat the Flood, but pass their final test for the mantle of responsibility. The Flood were born from the remnants of the Precursors, the godlike species who created all life in the Halo universe. The Precursors chose humanity as the heirs to their mantle of responsibility, an imperial piece that would essentially make them the rulers of the galaxy. However, before officially receiving the mantle, humanity are said to have to face the Precursors' final test when they are at their most ripe. A test that should come in the form of a galactic apocalypse of Flood, far bigger than any Flood force that we've ever seen in any of the Halo games yet. If humanity beat this Flood force and win, great, the cycle is broken, they achieve the mantle of responsibility, and the universe progresses as normal. But if they fail, well, the Flood consume the galaxy and the cycle repeats. So my idea is that humanity were not the first species to face this test. The Precursors are significantly older than anything in the Halo universe, and in their search for sufficient heirs to their mantle, they created several candidate species before humanity who failed the test, causing the Flood to win, who then recede from the galaxy, new life is created, and the cycle begins anew until a sufficient heir species is found or created. So just quickly to summarise, the Precursors create life, test them with the Flood, they ultimately fail and the Flood consume their galaxy, the Flood then recede, and the cycle repeats. But if you beat the Flood, well, the cycle is broken. That's probably the best description of the theory that I can give, but I did make a video about it, albeit like a decade ago, so the quality is questionable, but if you're interested, you know what to do. Halo Combat Evolved isn't real. So this is a bit of a weird one that I came up with that is technically true, but it's not quite as esoteric as it sounds. At no point did Bungie ever call Halo 1 Halo Combat Evolved. That's never what the game was meant to be called. However, in what was quite possibly the first instance of Microsoft's overbearing interference, Microsoft came in to Bungie and were like, yeah, you can't just call this game Halo, there's gotta be something else on the box to make people want to buy it because just Halo isn't grabby enough. So they suggested Combat Evolved. Now, the Combat Evolved suffix does make sense. I mean, Halo 1's gameplay and controls were pretty revolutionary, but there's a reason that you'll very rarely hear anyone who actually worked on Halo 1 call it Combat Evolved. It's also the reason why it's just called Halo on the binder of the game case as well, and funnily enough, that actually transferred over to the Gearbox port as well, which upheld that idea of just calling it Halo. Of course, it's called Combat Evolved on the front, and also, on the back of Halo 1 on Xbox it is, but not on the back of the Gearbox port, just called Halo in that. But even still, that's why, at least on the binders, it's just called Halo. So if you ever wonder why I tend to call it Halo 1 over Combat Evolved, then that's why. And funnily enough, this happened again with Halo Reach as well. Halo Reach was originally just going to be called Reach, but Microsoft insisted that it be called Halo Reach for brand recognition. And just like before, despite caving to the Halo prefix almost everywhere else, Bungie did stick to their guns with the intro of the game, which still just says Reach. You know, I do find it quite funny how with Halo 1, Microsoft were doubting the selling power of the word Halo, but then when Reach rolls around, all of a sudden, they're insisting that Bungie include the word Halo for selling power. You gotta love how Microsoft operate. Master Chief dies in Halo 3. Real. So in Halo 3, when Chief experiences the first Cortana moment, one of the Marines says that his vitals just pinged KIA, but obviously Chief's still alive and walking. At least, kind of.
Sir, you okay?
Your vitals just pinged KIA.
So the way that these Cortana Gravemind moments work is that they're telepathically induced into Chief by the Gravemind, who's weaponizing the precursor concept of neural physics. Essentially the idea that everything in existence is a living entity. It's kind of complicated, but the Gravemind essentially bending the fabric of existence to convey these messages to Chief causes his pulse, temperature, respiration rate, and blood pressure to all fall to fatal levels, which then immediately restore upon their completion. This also explains why your movement is slowed so much during these moments as well. Mjolnir functions based on brain function, and Chief's brain still had activity which allowed him to move, but his muscles were starved of oxygenated blood and so they moved really slowly. So just keep that in mind next time you're playing Halo 3, you're technically almost dead during these moments. Sapien Sunrise. Sapien Sunrise is a human extremist terror organization that operates in the outer colonies and the fringes of human space. They are staunchly opposed to any kind of alliance or even appeasement with any ex-Covenant species, but more specifically with the elites. They believe that the UEG's peace treaty with the elites is an act of treason, and that post-war humanity is, in essence, surrendering to the species that once killed billions of us. And, you know, they are right. Of course, we wouldn't have won the war if it weren't for the elites allying with us, but it's an objective fact that during the war that, by the way, they started, they killed billions, if not trillions of us. Well, okay, if you want to be pedantic, technically per Contact Harvest, we did shoot first, but they invaded first, so it was definitely on them. In 2558, Sapien Sunrise even tried to assassinate an outer colony ambassador who was going to be meeting with an elite Kaiden with plans to pin the assassination on the elites and try and stoke some kind of aggression against them. They infiltrated the ambassador's bodyguards, but thankfully Blue Team managed to foil their plot before it happened. They went in and they killed the undercover Sapien Sunrise members, but the ambassador was still killed. And to cover up the incident, the local government hid the fact that the Sapien Sunrise were involved at all and tried to pin the entire thing on the Master Chief, saying that he just went to a peace treaty and shot up a bunch of innocent people. This caused Chief and Blue Team to go AWOL, which was part of Hunt the Truth, but that's a whole different story for a different day. As far as we know, Sapien Sunrise are still operating on the outer colonies. I gotta say though, even though I might not agree with it, I do think that their propaganda was pretty raw. Like, these posters, these flyers are pretty cool, man. Like, I can appreciate good propaganda when I see it, even if I don't fall for it. Halo 3 Xenomorph official. So we all know that Halo took a lot of inspiration from Alien, but what if I told you that Halo 3 was originally meant to feature a literal xenomorph? You'd say like, oh, you're crazy, or you're clickbaiting, or you're lying, or there's a twist in this, right? You're gonna say something like, oh, but it was on a poster, or oh, but it was an emblem. Nope, Halo 3 almost featured literal xenomorphs. Eric Arroyo, who was one of the artists over at Bungie on Halo 3, recreated the alien warriors from Aliens in Halo 3's engine with hopes of prototyping a Halo meets Alien encounter in the game. Obviously, nothing ever came of this, but I find it insane how well this xenomorph actually fits within Halo's aesthetic. I mean, it's no surprise given that Halo was, of course, heavily based on Alien, but still, like, this model looks like it was designed, well, it was designed for Halo 3, but it looks right at home in it. It's wild to me that this is an official Bungie-made Halo 3 asset. Gets me wondering what that encounter might have looked like. Emil is a sociopath. So, sociopathy is defined as a pattern of antisocial behaviours and attitudes, including manipulation, deceit, aggression, and a lack of empathy for others. Now, I'm assuming that this entry is basing Emil being a sociopath on his lack of empathy in Halo Reach. He doesn't really seem to care when that girl's dad dies in Winter Contingency, and he doesn't seem to care when George dies either. It's kind of just water under the bridge for him. We never hear him say anything about Kat dying, but I'd also assume that he feels a similar way about her dying as well. So yeah, he definitely lacks empathy, and he absolutely has heightened aggression, but he doesn't manipulate or deceive, so I find it hard to describe him as sociopathic. When he was a kid, Emil's parents were both killed by the insurrection, and then his older brother, who cared for him in their stead, had to sacrifice himself so that Emil could escape when the Covenant glassed his home planet. So suffice to say, he had a really tough upbringing, which is more than likely why he became a Spartan, and also why he's so cold. But I wouldn't call him sociopathic, more so I'd say that he's psychopathic. I think he definitely fits that description way better. Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno is a 14th century narrative poem written by Dante Alighieri, who was a poet, a philosopher, and a writer, and it's about his journey through the 9 circles of hell, where he's led by the shade of an ancient Roman poet called Virgil. Where does this factor into Halo, I hear you ask? Well, Halo 3 ODST's story was almost entirely based on Dante's Inferno. In many places, it's an almost direct retelling of his journey through hell. Now, I recently did a massive deep dive video going into the similarities between Dante's Inferno and ODST, but a few small examples of similarities are the fact that Rookie is an ODST who falls feet first into hell, whereas Dante himself descends into hell. The Rookie is guided through his version of hell by an AI called Virgil, and Dante is guided through hell by a shade called Virgil. When the Rookie reaches the 9th sublevel of the Data Hive, it's consumed by ice, and when Dante reaches the 9th circle of hell, it is also consumed by ice. The 9th sublevel of the Data Hive contains a treacherous NMPD cop, and the 9th circle of hell is dedicated to those who commit sins of treachery. The Rookie emerges from the 9th sublevel on the morning of a Saturday, and Dante emerges from the 9th circle of hell at 7:30 AM on a Saturday. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Halo PS2. So based on the current rumours and speculation, Halo on PlayStation may actually end up becoming a reality, but this isn't the first time that those rumours have circulated. Before Halo 1 even launched, there were rumours of a PlayStation build of the game existing, with the rights to publishing it even being owned by Rockstar. Yes, the GTA Rockstar. Around the dawn of the millennium, Sony insiders even leaked the fact that Halo was intended to be one of the PS2's earliest releases. But of course, when Microsoft bought Bungie out in 2000, any hopes of Halo on PlayStation drifted into obscurity. Now, as far as I can tell, Bungie never came out to officially comment on this build. They never officially confirmed or denied that it existed, unlike Halo on DS, which they did come out and say wasn't made by them. Which means that there's very likely somebody out there, possibly even watching this video, who has an official build of Halo 1 on PS2 just sat on a hard drive somewhere. And please, if you are that person and you are watching this video, leak that build. Chiron TL-34 cloning facility. So Chiron TL34 is the infamous Halo 1 map that nobody in the history of humanity can memorize the layout of. It's a series of 13 different rooms, all connected via a series of teleporters, and it's one of the most uniquely designed levels that you will ever see in a video game. But weirdly, the original Halo 1 map description for the map states that it's a Spartan clone training facility, which implies that the Spartans were, at least some point, clones. Obviously, they didn't end up being clones, but I gotta say, in the Halo 1 E3 2000 build, Master Chief's voice is notably robotic.
Recon reporting. Hostiles have been neutralized.
Say again? Over.
The drop zone is clear.
And so I wonder if that's a leftover bit of lore from a version of Halo that never saw the light of day, in which, instead of being kidnapped children, the Spartans were actually robotic clones. Either way, Chiron is a badass map. This map deserves a one-to-one remake in a modern Halo game. The Didact's invasion of Liechtenstein. Nestled between Switzerland and Austria in Central Europe is the Principality of Liechtenstein, which 13 years ago suffered an invasion by the Didact in real life. Now I know you're waiting for the punchline. You're waiting for me to come up with some punchline here to say like, oh yeah, this happened, but it happened in a game, or it happened in a commercial, but no, the Didact did kind of technically invade Liechtenstein. As a part of Halo 4's marketing, they projected the Didact's sigil onto Gutenberg Castle, created a makeshift UNSC base in the countryside surrounding it, and converted a quarry into a battleground which had Chief driving around it in a warthog. It was all part of some pretty big marketing stunt for Halo 4, where they turned a significant part of this tiny country into the actual Halo universe for an immersive adventure for a select group of fans. And we don't know much about this adventure, but based on the video that Xbox released, it entailed moving through the woods at night with in-character UNSC personnel, pushing up to the castle with pyrotechnics and cool practical effects where they got to play Halo 4, and then witnessing another pyro show-off with Chief on the Warthog. Gotta say, it's pretty crazy marketing hiring an entire country out for like a day for a marketing campaign for a game. That said though, at that point, it only cost $70,000 to hire out Liechtenstein, which, you know, as far as hiring entire countries goes, is pretty cheap. Boren Syndrome. Boren Syndrome is a neurological condition that's caused by extended exposure to certain types of radiation, specifically the kinds of radiation emitted by plasma grenades and Covenant carbines, and that causes tumours and extreme migraines. Except, it isn't. Boren Syndrome doesn't actually exist. It was actually a fake disease created by ONI to cover up the side effects of the Orion project, which was essentially the Spartan 1 project, because once the project was closed down, its candidates were dispersed back into regular military action. The tumours and migraines were in fact caused by the DNA alteration that came with the Orion augmentations, which Sergeant Johnson underwent. But this fake illness actually had a really useful side effect. It inadvertently acted as a deterrent against the Flood. The reason that Sergeant Johnson wasn't infected on Alpha Halo was because the alterations to his neurology and DNA made it significantly harder for an infection form to actually infect him, so they went for other easily infectable hosts instead. He's not immune, it doesn't make you immune to the Flood, because as far as we know, no immunity or vaccination exists, it just makes you far harder to infect, so the Flood focused somebody else instead. Sexy Prophets. Now this is probably the most disturbing entry on this entire iceberg, because there was once a time when these scrotum-chin genocidal maniacs were in fact a truly beautiful species. Over 110,000 years before the Halo games, the Prophets were tall, slender and sleek, a beautiful race, strong and sensual, intelligent but not overly impressed by intellect, and capable of seducing other species with their almost universal beauty. Yep, you heard that right. Not only did ancient humans and foreigners find the Prophets beautiful, but many of them were also seduced by them, so I'll let that one simmer for a second. They eventually became the cretins that we know them as after they surrendered to the foreigners and were locked into existing on only a few select worlds, where they chose to put their faith in their paraplegic elders, and eventually, they were almost all that was left of their species. Shock Horror, yours truly, has already made a video about the Sexy Prophets, so if you want to find out more about this ridiculously disgusting but intriguing topic, then link down below. Mendicant Bias speaks to Chief. Throughout Halo 3's terminals, Mendicant Bias not only speaks to the Master Chief, but guides him as well. When the first terminal entry corrupts, in the corruption log on the left hand side, among the lines of ancient code, you'll see a single string of coherent words. These are the words of Mendicant Bias spoken directly to the Master Chief. I see you, Reclaimer. I have found the shard that was lost. They brought it back to me. Now my reconstitution cannot be stopped. The demons are not taking a kind view of your presence here. They don't want me speaking to you. And then, I win, which is followed by the terminal network being redirected and hijacked by Mendicant Bias from the Ark's demons. He then says, I'll tell you who I am. I am Mendicant Bias. This is what I have done. Which leads into his final terminal, where he reveals to Chief that he is once again betraying a former master. His first betrayal was of the Foreigners as he defected to the Flood, and now he's betraying the Flood, defecting to humanity. He declares that he's seeking atonement for his crimes and proving to his masters that he has changed, and that you will be his example. This terminal is just peak. I've been reading it since 2007, and the hairs on my arms still stand up whenever I read, well, the entire thing does that, but this one passage in particular really makes him stand up. I'm not so foolish to think that this will absolve me of my sins. One life hardly balances billions, but I would have my masters know that I have changed, and you shall be my example. Oh man, it's so marathon coded, dude. I love this so much. But yeah, Mendicant Bias is the reason that Chief survives the Warthog run on Installation 04B. He's also the reason that Chief got split from the Arbiter and sent to Requiem to go and wake the Didact up as well, which, shock horror, I covered in a video a year and a half ago, so link down below. Arbiter assassination attempt. 4 days after the end of Halo 1, ONI agent Jameson Locke began building a target profile on the then Thel 'Vadm, the Supreme Commander of the Fleet of Particular Justice that we fought at Alpha Halo. The target profile contained all of his known exploits, from Grey Team's first encounter with him on the rubble to his glassing of Reach, and was created with the intention of carrying out an assassination. Locke personally recommended that Thel be assassinated to try and slow down the Covenant's advance, and even offered to carry out the assassination himself, but presumably because he jumped back to High Charity, this assassination never happened. It all worked out in the end though. The Covenant made him the Arbiter, which led to the Great Schism and the Elites becoming our allies and helping us end the war, so no bad blood, right? Either way, this clandestine operation adds to the dark, only spook history of Locke. It's just such a shame that we never actually saw that side of him in Halo 5. Lost Google Videos content. So if, like me, you now qualify for an Internet Veterans discount code, then you'll remember that before the existence of YouTube was a little site called Google Videos. Google Videos was exactly what you think it was. It was a video platform hosted within Google's own search engine that worked just like Google Images does now, and it was where I saw my first ever Halo video in, early 2005. Now, I forget if it was the Halo Asshole music video, or an early episode of Red vs. Blue, or the Halo Kitty Cat dance video. I think it might have been that. But Google Videos was, in a roundabout way, my gateway into Halo content creation that is now my career. Now, I remember when Google bought YouTube, they started to really ham-fistly integrate it into Google Video searches to the point where you'd search for a video on Google Videos and 8 times out of 10, it'd be a YouTube video that you click on and it'd take you to the YouTube website, which used to really piss me off because I wanted to watch videos in the Google search engine, not on YouTube. It's funny how things change. Eventually though, they shut down Google Videos, and with it vanished a ton of real old school Halo videos from that era. Videos that dominated the video part of the internet in the early to mid noughties that are now gone forever. This is my personal burning of the Library of Alexandria, I'm not gonna lie. I grew up on Google Videos watching Halo stuff and loads of random other stuff on there as well. And knowing that that's all gone and will never come back is quite depressing. I still mourn Google Videos' passing to this very day. Forerunner skeleton on Earth. So we already covered Halo 2's original ending, but this entry specifically pertains to the skeleton that the Arbiter finds in the Forerunner casket in the Ark. Of course, at this point, the Ark was actually what became the Ark portal, so it was in Voi in Africa, and at the base of this structure were a bunch of Forerunner tombs that, when they were opened, had human skeletons in them that confirmed that the humans and Foreigners were the same thing. And I gotta say, if Bungie were ever to do an official, like, very overt reveal of the humans being Foreigners, because they wanted to kind of keep it low-key and implicit and imply it, but never, like, fully hard confirm it, because then the mystery goes out the window. But if they ever did choose to do, like, a real overt confirmation of it, this way would have been awesome. Imagine a gameplay segment, like, where you're playing as the Arbiter and you walk into this tomb room, and you get, like, a button prompt to, like, hold X to open casket, and you open it, and it's a very obviously Foreigner casket, but you see a human skeleton inside. How cool would that have been, man? I'm happy we got Halo 3 in the end, but at the same time, this ending would have been so cool. Blair Witch in the Swamp. So, really far out of bounds of the swamp of 343 Guilty Spark, there's a single lone Marine, unarmed, just standing in the fog, all alone. When people first found this, given that the level's obviously got an already creepy vibe, and also the fact that there's a ton of dead flood out there that you can't physically see unless you break out the map, they thought that this was some extension of the level's horror, but it's not. This is just Mendoza's model loaded in before the cutscene. However, in Halo 1 Anniversary, this little oddity takes a bit of a darker twist. Now, I don't know if this was intentional or was just a dark little accident, but in Anniversary graphics, they placed a tree right in front of Mendoza, making him look like a victim of the Blair Witch. So if you've never seen the Blair Witch Project before, then firstly, go and watch it, and secondly, the idea is that when the Blair Witch kind of possesses you or gets a hold of you, she makes you stand in a corner, upright, perfectly still, just facing the corner. Totally silent and unmoving, which is exactly what Mendoza's doing in Halo 1 Anniversary. Was this just a dark little accident, or did someone at Saber Interactive know about this old school urban legend and decide to turn it into an even darker Easter egg? I'll let you decide. Waterborne Flood Infection. And to round out the Midnight Facility tier, Tier 5, we have a potentially horrifying implication about the Flood that Halo's lore seems to have entirely glossed over, and it all stems from this tank on the Oracle in Halo 2. So, this area of the gas mine was actually a Flood laboratory, where the Foreigners stored a litany of Flood samples and had numerous testing rooms, but for what purpose we don't know. One of the few things that we do know, however, is that clearly they were investigating the Flood's ability to exist in water, which clearly they're able to do. Now, given that almost every Flood form naturally secretes the Flood supercell, which the ingestion of is all that's needed to begin infecting a host, these Flood entities so easily existing in water that, mind you, is an awfully fitting Flood green colour, implies that they're able to infect bodies of water by secreting the supercell into it. If an ocean were to be infected, then anyone who goes in the ocean water would stand a significant chance of being infected thanks to the supercell. And the thought of that is frankly terrifying. We already know that the Flood can consume fauna and natural environments on land, but to be able to spread the infection through water makes them infinitely more dangerous than they already are. Just imagine, right? Your planet is suffering from a cataclysmic Flood outbreak, but you happen to live on an island surrounded by a body of water. You think you're safe, right? Well, imagine if the Flood infected that entire body of water that surrounds your island. Pretty terrifying, I gotta say. I really hope that this implication actually gets canonized at some point, because I'd love to see a horror story based around that. So welcome to the penultimate tier, Tier 6, which is called the Composed tier, and for this tier I have done my final costume change. As you can see, I've dimmed the lights in my big office, which is just my bedroom, and I've decided to put on the ultimate shirt. We're going to spiral out, my friends. We are going to look at some of the creepiest things, well, the creepiest things on this iceberg. I've got my coffee. Let's go. Starting off Tier 6, we have Jason Jones went missing. And we're starting off this tier with a rather dark urban legend that went round my friend group specifically back in the days of Halo 3. That being that the Jason Jones Easter egg in Halo 3 was added to the game by Bungie developers to honour one of their friends and fellow developers who went missing during the game's development and was never found. Now obviously this isn't the case because that Easter egg is also present in Halo 2 and it's just, well, that's not the case, that's not why it was added. But myself and my entire friend group who I played Halo 3 with, and actually other friend groups that I met through Halo 3 that mixed with my friend group, all kind of just believe this. And I mean, when you consider that out of bounds in this near pitch black corner of a dark, deserted foreigner facility that you were never meant to find, there's this half-naked guy just floating there, hands behind his head as if he's about to be executed, well, the Easter egg is pretty damn creepy if you stumble across it without any backstory. Honestly, the whole design of this area of Halo just feels unsettling. It feels truly like something that you were never meant to find, and the Jason Jones Easter egg is just the cherry on top. This urban legend added a really dark twinge to this Easter egg and also this entire area, and although I know that it's not true, I just can't shake that dark twinge that it added. Rage Virus Flood. So in Alex Garland's Halo script, the way that he wrote the Flood, specifically in our first encounter with them during 343 Guilty Spark, was almost identical to the way that he wrote the Rage Infected in 28 Days Later. Lots of aggressive cuts and visceral camera angles from the perspective of the infected sprinting towards the Marines. It's all just so perfect. The scene itself was a bit different in the movie. It was actually Major Silver, one of the ODSTs, who went down to the facility instead of the Marines, and the script goes as follows. A noise from somewhere in the darkness, a scuttling or slithering. All beams sweep in that area and find nothing. Now a noise from the other direction and the beams sweep again, and again, find nothing. Helljumper. Major, I'm telling you, this feeling is real bad. Now cut back to some distance from the group of special forces. We can see them, a little pocket of light in the otherwise huge dark space. A beat, then suddenly the slithering, scuttling sound is right beside us, in our ear. And the next moment, we start to move towards the group of special forces, covering the distance at amazing speed. And as we are within 20 meters, the beams sweep towards us, blinding us and illuminating us, and we see the soldiers opening fire. And then the fear on their faces. But we continue towards them at the same breakneck speed, closing in on the face of Captain Keyes, eyes bulging as he blazes his assault rifle into his eyes. This is one of a few examples from this script, but given that the Halo movie script was more than likely the first script that Alex Garland wrote after wrapping on 28 Days Later, you can really just see the influence from 28 Days and the Rage Infected oozing into the way that he wrote the Flood. You guys know full well that I am a die-hard fan of the 28 series, but 28 Days in particular, and I will forever be depressed that we never got to see Alex's vision of the Halo universe, specifically of the Flood. Writing combat forms and infection forms, like the Rage Infected, is just so perfect. The real-life Halo cult. In 2007, a cult took to Times Square, armed with flyers and placards adorned with ancient symbols to preach their truth. This cult are called the Society of the Ancients, and they believed that a series of unexplainable events and artifacts dotted throughout human history were actually the doing of an ancient race of alien visitors who came to Earth and either helped us create them or in some way helped expedite our technological evolution. They cite things like various crop circles, the Antikythera mechanism, which is an ancient Greek hand-powered orrery, and an out-of-place 110 million year old human handprint, which is impossible given that modern scientific evidence dictates that we as a species are only 300,000 years old. And well, as we know, based in Halo lore at least, the Society of the Ancients were onto something. Their existence was part of Halo 3's marketing, which focused heavily on the human-foreigner connection, and this cult had unknowingly collated evidence that reveals humanity's true nature, the fact that we were once the foreigners. Weaving this into the real world by creating a real-world Halo cult that went out into the world to preach about this stuff was so awesome. I made a whole video about these guys last year, shock horror, link down below in the description. Bungie's ability to connect an in-game conspiracy with real-world conspiracies and have that in-game conspiracy become a part of our real world was just awesome. The Society of the Ancients are my favourite bit of obscure Halo lore, and yeah, although this iteration of them was only part of a marketing campaign, I like to imagine that maybe one of the people who took one of the flyers they were handing out in Times Square that day went home, had a good read of the flyer, and thought, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. and started their own cult off the back of it. You never know. The Flood is life. So this is in reference to one of the more disturbing elements of the Flood that's in relation to the Logic Plague, which we are going to come to in a minute. And that's the fact that the Flood is, at least theoretically, the next step in evolution. During Halo 3's terminals, when the Gravemind corrupts Mendicant Bias, it says, "The complexity of our spread and our appearance ushered in the beginning of the third stage of evolution." Then, once corrupted, Mendicant Bias says, "My creators chose to remain beholden to ancient myths. It does not matter where they claim their authority originates. It obstructs the path of universal evolution and must be removed. Their obstinacy in the face of the inevitable progression of nature can no longer be tolerated." So one of the truth newts, so to speak, that the Gravemind and the Flood gives to non-biologicals when trying to infect them with the Logic Plague is the seemingly irrefutable proof that they are indeed the next step in the galaxy's evolution, that mystical third step, which is pretty terrifying. And by extension, it also refers to the fact that unlike any other species in existence, the Flood represent total and utter unity, and also are inevitable. In Primordium, the Primordial, who of course was one of the last precursors and the first Gravemind, says, "We are the Flood. Until all space and time are rolled up and life is crushed in the folds, no end to war, grief, or pain. In 101,000 centuries, unity again, and wisdom. Until then, sweetness." Sweetness to the Primordial is akin to grief. It sees the two as the same thing, and so what it's saying here is that there will never be true unity in the galaxy before the inevitable collapse of the universe, besides with the Flood. They're a hive mind with no sense of individual thought, so there can never be any bickering or any kind of inner conflicts. They're one mind in 100,000 bodies, regardless of the species those bodies come from. The Ross-Ziegler effect. The Ross-Ziegler effect, or the Ross-Ziegler blip, was a stratigraphic event that was discovered on Earth and various other planets in 2332. So stratigraphy is a branch of geology that's concerned with the study of rock layers and layering, and is typically used to find and date fossils. So this discovery, this event, dated back over 100,000 years, but at the time of its discovery, there was no data that supported any kind of mass extinction event happening at that time, nor was there really any reason to logically assume that one could have happened because there was a total lack of any fossil evidence. As such, this blip was simply dismissed as a spatial distortion. At least it was until our discovery of our ancestors and the firing of the Halos at the end of the Fallen Flood War, which ended up being the explanation for this blip. It was simply the byproduct of the mass destruction of biomass and sentient life when the Halos fired. This blip fascinates me because imagine making a fairly major scientific discovery that's completely unexplainable. And then it turns out that it actually is explainable, and that the explanation was that it was caused by the genocidal conclusion of your ancestors' galactic war against an all-consuming zombie parasite. And for that discovery to be made on your home planet nonetheless. Pretty freaky. The Logic Plague. The Logic Plague is, I think, the most terrifying form of Flood infection. Yes, physical infection is horrific and agonizingly painful, but the implications of the Logic Plague go far beyond physical pain. The Logic Plague is the Flood's way of infecting non-biological hosts, or of inducing a sort of psychosis in biological hosts. It is essentially an informational parasite designed to corrupt the motivations of its victims. It's delivered through philosophical means of corruption. Essentially, it's structured as a very well thought out and convincing argument, backed up with indisputable facts sourced from the domain, the precursor wealth of ancient knowledge that Graveminds readily have access to. When used against AIs, specifically smart AIs, it exploits the ideological basis of their programming which is imparted onto them by their creators. Against foreigner AIs specifically, the Gravemind sourced information from the domain which was seen as sacred by their creators, and so they had no reason to doubt it. But it can also be used as a means of torture against smart AIs, as was the case with Cortana in Halo 3. Dumb AIs and computer networks are also susceptible as well. Through means unknown, it can be used to corrupt entire networks. Against biologicals, it can send them insane and break their will, as was the case with the Didact. But the most notable victim of the logic plague was hands down Mendicant Bias, the AI in charge of the Forerunners' entire military effort against the Flood, who was corrupted by the Gravemind, and was the main reason that the war ended so violently. The logic plague is typically imparted by a Gravemind, but as the Flood evolve, it can be spread by just about any Flood form, combat forms included, because the Gravemind can speak through them and convey the logic plague through them, and the implications of that are terrifying. One horde of combat forms are all it'd take for an entire computer network, or an entire organization of AIs to be infected by the parasite. The informational power that the Flood can achieve via the logic plague is staggering, and it ends up being the main means of accelerated evolution towards the end of their evolutionary cycle. The Composer's Abyss. The Composer was one of the most terrifying and excruciatingly painful devices in the Forerunners toolset. It was designed to allow the transition of one's soul from a physical form to a digital form, and was used en masse by the Didact when creating his Promethean Knights to try and combat the Flood. But once a victim goes through the agonizingly painful process of composition, where does their soul go? The Composer's Abyss. Originally located on Installation 03, the Abyss is a cavernous room with a walkway, flanked by 2 walls full of the wailing souls of those composed, stuck in this limbo state, unable to leave, and without purpose until the end of eternity. Now, on its own, the Abyss is pretty horrific, but there's a bit in Dante's Inferno that I can't find for the life of me, and I don't know why, that is an almost one-to-one description of the Abyss. It's an area that's deep within hell where souls are affixed to the walls. It's a really similar description, which is where I think they got the idea from. It always blew me away that in Halo Escalation, when Blue Team go through the Abyss, even though they're only in it for 30 seconds, the actual horror of what's going on in this facility that they're in kind of just goes over their heads, and it's also forgotten at the end as well. No one goes back to it, which I found pretty crazy, because I mean, this art is terrifying, man. Like, imagine hearing those souls wailing for you when you're walking through there. Whew, I'm good, thanks. Asteroidia experiments. Asteroidia merozoite was a highly virulent parasitic disease that was native to the world of Burugi, which, in 2538, suffered a severe outbreak of it at one of its major schools. 10,000 students were infected and only 9 survived, specifically those with mutations that cause thalassemia, a rare blood disorder that reduces the production of hemoglobin. The outbreak caused so much damage that the school was shut down in 2541, and then the entire colony of Burugi was placed under biohazard quarantine. A quarantine so severe that the entire planet was surrounded by thermonuclear mines, and also blockade beacons were placed around it as well to warn off any approaching ships. Initially, what happened at Burugi was public record, but in 2553 it was classified and Asteroidia research was moved to the Argent Moon, one of ONI's many non-existent research stations, where yet another outbreak occurred where the Asteroidia was vaporized and spread throughout the ship's air vents. Everybody on board was killed, some instantly, liquidized from the inside, others taking hours to die. The purpose of ONI's research was to turn Asteroidia into a bioweapon, which they were testing specifically on live jackals and also other unknown creatures as well. The jackals were killed instantly, but the other creatures grew hideous growths and bone malformations. Had they been successful, the efficacy of weaponized Asteroidia would have been astronomical. With this airborne variant, ONI would have been able to annihilate entire planets at the drop of a hat, but thankfully, Blue Team scuttled the station before they could do so. Ling Ling's Head. So Ling Ling's Head is the first of the 2 pieces of extremely disturbing Bungie lore. Ling Ling wasn't so much Bungie's dog, but rather the decapitated head of a dog that somewhere in the Bungie offices they kept in a jar of formaldehyde. It's said to have some kind of mystical significance, and under no circumstances should you ever open the jar and dare to drink the head water down in one mighty draught. At one point, Ling Ling's head went missing, and recovering it was considered step 5 on Bungie's 7 steps of world domination, a step which was clearly completed. Now, Ling Ling's head makes an appearance on Zanzibar, and also its Halo 2 anniversary remake, Stone Town. It's also in Reach's tribute room, and is an avatar on Bungie.net, along with being present in some other weird places as well. Now, if you hadn't already noticed, no, Bungie didn't keep an actual decapitated head of a dog in a jar of formaldehyde in their offices. This is just some weird bit of Bungie lore that bled into the games. As is the next entry, the disembodied soul, who was a core part of Bungie.net for 15 years. This creature was said to be either the tortured soul of the person who pirated and leaked one of Marathon's betas, or the soul of the one who printed the wrong labels and stuck them on 1500 Marathon Infinity CDs, more than likely the latter. According to the webmaster that we covered all the way back in the first tier, Bungie captured the idiot who was responsible for this misprinting and sucked his soul into their web server, where he's damned to answer tech support questions in his incredibly brain-dead fashion for 24 hours a day for all of eternity. They also encourage users to torment the disembodied soul whenever they like. Now, apparently, Sketch was the one who held the former body of the soul down, whilst other employees of Bungie used the soul extraction machine to suck his soul out and put it in the Bungie servers. Old school Bungie lore is literally insane. I don't mean that figuratively or in like a modern sense, I mean it in the most textbook Oxford Dictionary definition of insanity. It was insane. Time travel. So, contrary to at least modern popular belief, time travel is actually something that has existed in Halo pretty much since the get-go. In First Strike, Halsey and the surviving Spartans on Reach find this Forerunner crystal with extreme space-time warping capabilities. This crystal ended up actually being the source of the Arc portal on Reach that we found out about in Shadows of Reach. When Master Chief and the other survivors of Alpha Halo arrived back at Reach to rescue them, thanks to the crystal's properties, they'd actually travelled back in time. So they left Alpha Halo on September 22nd and arrived at Reach on September 7th, effectively going back more than 2 weeks in time. That's the most kinda conventional means of time travel, but of course there's also slipspace as well, which is at least an indirect means of time travel, but that's mostly down to how cryo works. Because slipspace travel can obviously take a very long time, going into cryo during the jump is very common, but the whole point of cryo is that it essentially pauses the aging of your body. So say a 25-year-old undergoes 2 years of cryo and wakes up in their 27th year. Well, as far as aging's concerned, they're still 25, but calendar-wise they're 27. But then of course there's the more recent example of time travel, which I'm using very loosely, pertaining to the Endless and also that random portal that opens up when Chief killed the Harbinger in Halo Infinite. When you jump through that portal, you end up on the complete opposite side of the ring with mere seconds past. But then the weapon says that 3 days have passed since you went through the portal, which of course implies some kind of time travel. Now, we don't know if this has anything to do with the Endless yet. I really don't know why some people are adamant that the Endless are time travelers or something. Like, I don't know where that's come from, because this portal very clearly wasn't opened by the Endless. My headcanon is that it was actually opened by offensive bias to save Chief now that the Endless have been freed. But I guess we're gonna have to wait and see if that's actually the case in God knows how many years when Halo 7 comes out. But then there's also one more example of time travel, which again is a bit of a weird one, and it's also the oldest one in the entirety of Halo lore. So when the Foreigners killed the Primordial, they put him in a time capsule, which within, they're able to manipulate time, and they basically accelerated time by, I think it was millions or maybe even billions of years to rapidly age the Primordial within, and essentially age him into dust. Yeah, it's no like Back to the Future style of time travel, but technically the Primordial travelled forward like millions or billions of years in that process, and of course died in the process as well. The Battle of October 10th. The Battle of October 10th was an extremely weird naval battle that took place on shock horror October 10th, 2552, between the events of Halo 1 and Halo 2. Just 10 days before the Covenant invaded Earth, Battle Group Rhino of the UNSC's 3rd Fleet detected 12 large, unidentified vessels in the Sol system, broadcasting outdated civilian IFF codes. When Rhino approached these vessels, 11 of them immediately jumped into slipspace, and Rhino engaged the last one. It actually managed to take out one of Rhino's ships, which suffered hull breaches and also boarding parties. Battle Group Rhino then disengaged and regrouped, but they weren't allowed to re-engage again, and just like that, the Battle of October 10th was over. What happened to that one ship that they engaged is unknown, but the bigger question and the much weirder oddity that comes from this is who the hell did these ships belong to? For them to be entirely unknown to the UNSC and also capable of FTL travel makes me think that they may have been some random mysterious species from a far-flung galaxy that accidentally wandered onto humanity's backyard. Maybe they were the same species that crashed on Installation 04. Whether it is or isn't though, this is such a strange piece of Halo lore that we've not had any elaboration about since, and frankly, I don't think we ever will do. Unused gore textures. So in almost every Bungie Halo game, there exist secret gore textures that you never see because obviously the games don't have dismemberment, as much as I wish they did. In Halo 1, the Grunts had textures for being beheaded, and the Marines had a special mangled texture where their chest cavity was torn open, which is presumably flood related like the mangled Elite. Halo 2's Spartans and Elites had gore textures hidden within their arms. Halo 3's Rats, of all creatures, had inner textures, which hinted at rat dismemberment, and Reach's Elites had stomach textures. I do wonder why Bungie made these, because as far as we know, they never had any intention of adding like Gears of War style dismemberment, so why would they add these textures? Strange. The true nature of the Flood. The Halo games of course convey the Flood as ancient, albeit terrifying cosmic zombies, but the actual reality of them is so much more creepy. Something that I like to do with quite a lot of Halo lore is imagine if it was real. Like imagine if it was happening or if it was discovered in real life. And if you do this with the Flood, as if they weren't already creepy enough, well, their creepiness is dialed up to 11. So of course the Flood were born from the corrupted remnants of the Precursors, who returned to bring vengeance to those who genocided them, the Foreigners. But it's the Precursors themselves that are at the core of this entry. They are literally the gods of the Halo universe. Everything that we believe an omnipotent god is and does, the Precursors essentially were. They were the creators of all life in the universe, the creators of everything that we know and hold dear. And they became zombies. Now imagine if nowadays we found objective, indisputable proof that not only is or was God a real entity, but that some part of that god or godlike species corrupted and created a species of zombies that our ancestors waged a galactic war to stop and reset the entire galaxy to prevent from consuming the entire thing. To me, that's such a terrifying and simultaneously earth-shattering realization, and yet in Halo it's true. You know, I do wonder how any members of ONI who may be religious reacted when they discovered this information. Like, did it further cement their faith? Did it make them turn on their faith and their beliefs? Some really interesting food for thought there. The Far Isle Massacre. So, the massacre on Far Isle is probably one of the top 3 worst things that the UNSC, and I guess by extension ONI, have ever done. In 2492, the insurrection was at its peak. Civil unrest was rife among the outer colonies. The centralized United Earth government was deeply despised, leading to civilian revolts on multiple planets, including the colony of Far Isle. The unrest on Far Isle got so bad that it was proving almost impossible to contain, and so instead of just abandoning the world or trying to come to some sort of bargain deal with the rebellion, the UNSC went straight to DEFCON 1. They unleashed their entire nuclear arsenal on the colony, razing it to the ground and killing almost every single civilian in a raging nuclear fire. This only worsened rebellions on other colonies, having the adverse effect to what the UEG actually wanted, and so they killed potentially billions of dissenting civilians for nothing. I think when it comes to containing some kind of civil unrest, using a nuke might be the worst possible way to go about that. The reality of the Flood outbreak on High Charity. So the Flood outbreak on High Charity is something that we only experienced very briefly and also in a very, very small section of the Holy City. Yeah, it definitely has its moments of horror in Halo 2, like specifically when you go down into the dark, flood-filled hallways. Yeah, that's pretty creepy, but what we see in the game is only a fraction of the overall outbreak. We spend all of our time in Halo 2 in the Prophet's upper region, but if you gaze off the side of the map, you'll see the entire city of the ship, which makes up the bulk of its population. So within that city lived 23.8 million profit civilians and, brace yourself, 7.7 billion civilians of all the other Covenant species, and that entire city was infected. So let's say that the flood used, 30% of the overall population for just raw biomass, like what we saw in Cortana in Halo 3. Well, that still means that the flood created 5.39 billion combat forms with their infection of the city. But it gets worse. High Charity's power was sourced from the key ship, which of course left the city at the end of Halo 2. But at this point, the outbreak had only just begun. But as it leaves, all power to the city is drained, and the entire Holy City is plunged into darkness. Now, just imagine for a second being one of those 7.7 billion citizens living in that undoubtedly extremely tightly packed city. The outbreak is spreading rapidly throughout the districts. There are infected everywhere. The streets are crowded with individuals trying to flee and infected alike. And then suddenly, the lights go out, and the entire city is plunged into darkness, but the infected just keep coming. Just imagine how terrifying that would have been for those living there. You know, it actually really reminds me of Mark's description in 28 Days Later of the outbreak at Paddington Station. How there were so many people there trying to get on trains or planes to flee, and there were so many people that you couldn't tell infected and uninfected alike, and that when he was trying to escape, at one point the floor became squidgy and he looks down and he realises that he's walking over dead bodies. That description fits the outbreak in the lower districts so well. That must go down as like the most terrifying outbreak in the entirety of Halo's lore, and I can't believe that we've never had any kind of story, let alone a game set there. And so that brings us to Tier 7, the final tier of this iceberg, the Consumed tier. Starting out with something that is very stupid in a litany of ways, and frankly deeply irresponsible of those who created it. And like, I'm actually not even being funny with this, like genuinely. You can see the entry is Master Chief, and well, it comes from the Halo TV show. So of course in the TV show, the Master Chief, who's not actually the Master Chief, it's a stupid bastardization of his character, sleeps with Marquis, who was a female human member of the Covenant, who was being held as a POW by the UNSC. Now, putting aside the stupidity of the writing of this, Chief here technically commits what this entry is, because as per the Third Geneva Convention, he abused his power as a captor to get out of a prisoner, thus making him, you know what. I'm not going to say the word because frankly it just seems wrong to describe Chief of all characters in that way. I was originally going to put just Halo TV show in this section because that show was awful and deeply disturbing, but I've just felt that this ridiculous part of the story deserved to be here, because not only was it awful writing and a complete bastardization of Chief, but like, no one did their research to think like, hang on, maybe a soldier shouldn't be doing this with a prisoner of war, given what that means. Stupid. Now, this next entry is going to be treated with a similar level of sincerity, because it's not really anything to laugh about here, because it was real and it happened, and as you can see by the entry, that is the Halo 3 murder. In 2007, 15-year-old Daniel Petrick was injured while skiing. Guy was considered a nice kid with a loving relationship with his parents and had many friends at school. Nothing was considered wrong with this guy at all. He was just considered a really fine, normal, happy teenager. But thanks to being housebound due to his injury, he had nothing to do, until his friend brought over an Xbox and they started playing Halo together. Upon being introduced to Halo for the first time, like I'm sure many of us were, Petrick became pretty addicted and started playing 7 to 8 hours a day, but the thing was, he lived in a household with parents who at the time were very against video game violence, because you've got to remember that this was during the era where people actually thought that video games directly influenced real life violence. When Petrick told his dad that he was going to go out and buy the Halo games, his dad said absolutely no, if you do, we'll kick you out of the house. So he moved in with his friend for the weekend and spent the entire weekend playing Halo. He played upwards of 18 hours a day. Daniel was truly addicted, and so regardless of what his dad said, he went out and bought a copy of Halo 3, which he tried to sneak back into his house, but his dad foiled his plan, took the game and confiscated it, storing it in his safe next to his home defense pistol. The game stayed in the safe for about a week, until October 20th, not even a month after Halo 3 came out. Daniel stole the key to the safe, went to it, unlocked it, got his copy of Halo 3, but also got his dad's gun. He then went downstairs and stood behind his parents, who were sitting on the couch, and said, "Close your eyes, I have a surprise for you," and then proceeded to shoot both his parents in the back of the head. His mum died immediately, but miraculously his dad survived. His sister and her husband then came over, and they were supposed to be coming over anyway, but they'd arrived a couple hours early, which Daniel didn't expect. So when they came to the door, he told them not to come in because their parents were fighting, but they got in anyway and realised what had happened, but by that time, Daniel had fled. He drove away, but was caught by the police as he was fleeing. Upon questioning, it turned out that Daniel had actually been planning the killing a week in advance, and he'd even planted the gun in his dad's hand to try and make it look like a murder-suicide, hence why he told his sister that his parents were fighting. Thanks to his age, Daniel only narrowly avoided the death penalty, and instead was given life in prison with the possibility of parole after 23 years, which is coming up in just 5 years' time, and frankly, I find it insane that somebody who committed a premeditated double homicide against his parents nonetheless is able to be walking free in 5 years' time. It's a pretty scary thought. Overall, this case is one of those things that seems too disturbing to be real, it just seems fictitious, but unfortunately it isn't. Now, this goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Very clearly, this was not caused by the fact that Halo 3 had guns in it, or that Halo 3 is a violent video game, which is what all the boomers back then would have tried to convince people it was caused by. It was obviously just caused by the fact that his dad confiscated the game off him, and that Daniel Petrick very clearly had a screw loose and then some, and the game being confiscated just knocked that screw even looser and made him carry out something pretty awful. But the fact that this even happened in the first place to me is horrendously mind-blowing, to be quite honest with you. The disappearance of Dr. Jonas Volman. So back to something that is creepy, but thankfully fictitiously creepy. Dr. Jonas Volman was a genetic scientist who was the author of the book The Castaway Theory, which formed a core part of Halo 3's Iris ARG. So Iris focused on humanity's true ancestry, the fact that humans are foreigner, and the way it was delivered was via the Society of the Ancients, who we already looked at, whose views were supported by the research and findings of this Dr. Jonas Volman. Research and findings that all stemmed from the Castaway Theory. However, in 2005, after he published this book that proved that humanity's origins are not what modern science teaches, Dr. Jonas Volman mysteriously disappeared. Clearly, Volman had flown too close to the sun. His research had unearthed truth known only to the top 1% of the top 1%, who feared the repercussions of that truth getting out, and so they disappeared him. But weirdly, Volman mysteriously reappeared in August 2007, where he revealed that he was working on his next book, The Places the Earth Stands Still, which was planned to expand on the ideas in the Castaway Theory. Now, this book never released, and we've never heard anything else about the Society of the Ancients or Dr. Jonas Volman since the Iris campaign concluded. But there's no way that his disappearance was just down to research. Given his field of research, he definitely flew too close to the sun and had a run-in with people who the world shouldn't know exist, all by proving the truth that we, humanity, were once foreigner. The Prisoner. So the Halo 1 Anniversary map pack for Halo Reach contains a remake of Halo 1's Prisoner called Solitary. The map's setting and lore was that of a maximum security foreigner prison, referred to as a sky crypt, used to contain or isolate the most dangerous beings encountered by the Ecumene. These sky crypts are gigantic towers, suspended above the icy wastes of a distant, unknown planet, and with a perpetually rotating outer ring to make the mere thought of escape impossible. The specific entities held within this facility are entirely unknown. The mere thought of what the foreigners would need to construct such facilities to contain is frankly terrifying. But what's even more terrifying is that one of these entities actually managed to escape. A giant gaping hole has been ripped open in the upper wall of the facility, the foreign alloy twisted and contorted by a being of immense strength and power that made it out the other side and has never been encountered since, at least to our knowledge. The fear of not knowing who or what this prisoner is, what species it belongs to, or where it went after freeing its containment is only worsened when you consider the level of security that the foreigners deemed necessary to contain it. Flood Cannibal Cult. So in Halo lore, there exists an extremist sect of the Covenant religion who take the Great Journey so seriously that they not only believe that the Flood is something that the Covenant should be protecting, but further that they should be embracing it. So much so that a shipmaster who was present at the Battle of Delta Halo in Halo 2 even prepared to allow the Flood on board his ship to consume his entire crew, but thankfully he was stopped. This extremist sect were called the Governors of Contrition, but as extreme and disturbing as their ideology sounds, they in fact aren't the focus of this entry. What we're actually looking at is a level of Flood appeasement, so to speak, that is infinitely worse than anything the Governors have ever done. So when the first Flood outbreak occurred 100,000 years ago among the ancient humans and ancient prophets, they didn't quite turn into the combat forms that we know of upon infection. They grew fleshy growths and extra biomass and were absolutely infected, but they were still relatively human and Sanshayum, just with the added urge to spread the infection and consume. And so, with this combination of human intellect and primal Flood urges, the infected would form cults centered around cannibalism to spread the parasite. These cults would capture uninfected individuals and force them to consume the flesh of an infected individual whilst they were still alive. And even worse, this sacrificial infected would very often be force-fed to a point of extremity before being offered up to the uninfected individual, causing their bodies to swell with huge mounds of infected biomass to maximize the spread of the infection. The precursors know they're in a video game. Now, this one is pretty meta, but it feeds in to the insane levels of knowledge and the insane capabilities of the precursors, and it all centers around their concept of neural physics. So neural physics was this kind of scientific/philosophical concept that the precursors held that everything in existence was a living being, just in a way that biological organisms couldn't quite comprehend. So that means that as much as I am a living being, this phone would be a living being, or this mug would be a living being, just not in a way that I or you would ever be able to truly understand. Using this idea, the precursors managed to ascend to transcentiency, which essentially means that as a species, their existence was elevated beyond any kind of conventional existence or plane of reality that we could understand. Using these abilities, they could shapeshift, send messages through the fabric of the universe, open portals to literally anywhere in the galaxy, craft immense structures like star roads and orbital arches from unbending filaments, and use them to traverse the galaxy, among many other things. To accurately describe the existence and the state of the precursors is almost intentionally impossible for me to do because, well, I'm a human. The whole point is that I simply cannot comprehend it. And so, with that in mind, who's to say that the precursors haven't used their immense power and intelligence to break the shackles of the fourth wall, escape their video game prison, and become real entities that have transcended Halo into real life? But we don't know about it because we as humans simply can't perceive them. Okay, it's 11:20 at night, so it's probably too late to be going into this, but topic for debate. Is it theoretically possible to create a fictitious entity so intelligent that it can transcend the fiction, break the fourth wall, and, well, transcend into real life? What if real life is just the plane of existence above fiction? Yes, too late to be discussing that. Leave your thoughts down below in the comments. Let's move on. Human Flood Experiments. Okay, so moving away from the hypothetical and very much into reality, at least in the Halo universe, we have something that is disturbingly real. So we know that humanity in Halo and also in the real world will try to weaponize anything. If it exists, we will try and turn it into a weapon, and the Flood were no exception. Following our first encounter with the parasite in Halo 1, Oni knew what they had to do. They took control of the Mona Lisa, a high-security prison ship, and jumped it to the wreckage of Alpha Halo, where they recovered samples of the infection and took it aboard. Held within the Mona Lisa were a number of human prisoners, but they also brought elite prisoners on board as well. Their intentions? To experiment with the Flood on these individuals of varying species in an attempt to control and, down the line, weaponize the Flood. Their goal was to create infected so controllable that the UNSC could send them into battle and use them to destroy the Covenant, and to be fair, had they pulled this off, then I think it would have ended the war in a heartbeat. But as always, it didn't work out. Just like always, the Flood broke containment and spread throughout the Mona Lisa like wildfire, consuming almost everything on board before the ship was destroyed. Now, this is the only known time in Halo lore that Oni tried to experiment on the Flood, but you know for a god-given fact that it's not the only time. They've done this before, and I guarantee they're still doing it. I mean, hell, the Oni agent responsible for the Mona Lisa experiments actually escaped the ship and vanished following its destruction, and I can guarantee that that dude is still out there somewhere in the exact same line of work, just under a different pseudonym. The Entity in Slipspace. Now, this is something that somehow I had no idea about until I researched for this video, and man, it's terrifying. So when Halsey was doing all of her AI experiments on Reach, one of the main ones that she did involved putting an AI in slipspace to create a fractal housing that would allow it to expand indefinitely. But thanks to the beyond exponential expansion of the AI, it started generating disturbing nonsense in the words of Halsey. Comments on humanity that defy reason, on the Covenant, on another step in time and a lost consciousness. But then, a comment about the other intellects in the mist. The AI had encountered entities existing in slipspace, but before we could find out anything else about them, Halsey terminated the experiment, leaving the AI within. Partly, I assume, due to the disturbing reactions that the AI was giving. But the real question is who or what are these entities in the mist, and frankly, we don't know. They could be other AIs, maybe the Assembly or foreign AIs, or maybe even precursor AIs like Abaddon, or it could just be a different species that is somehow native to slipspace. No idea how that one would work. I gotta say though, the fear of the unknown with this one, calling them the intellects in the mist, is pretty terrifying, and it's made even scarier by how abruptly and quickly Halsey terminates the experiment. Now, an interesting detail is that all this information about the intellects in the mist and these experiments are only located on the infamous lost pages of Halsey's journal. So basically, of the hundreds of thousands of Reach Legendary Editions that Bungie shipped out, I think only 7 of them contained journals with these pages. So for 99.999% of people, these pages were intentionally ripped out by Dr. Halsey and were missing. Now, is it too much of a reach to assume that these intellects in the mist are the reason that, in universe, Halsey ripped these pages out and made sure nobody could see them? I'd hazard a guess that at least in part, had something to do with it. Either way, the vibe of what Halsey discovered here is really creepy. Who are these intellects in the mist that exist beyond the veil of our reality? I don't think we'll ever know. Halo is real. Back to the more meta stuff, this one is really interesting because it all pertains to modern history and current events. So, as far as we know, modern times, and also history and ancient history in the Halo universe are almost exactly the same as in real life. Things like World War II, the Cold War, the space race, modern society, the ancient Greeks and Romans, etc, etc. As far as the current lore goes, everything that we currently know about history also exists in Halo's lore. Of course, in 2025, we haven't yet discovered our true ancestry and the entire era of the galaxy that occurred 100,000 years ago, but besides that, everything that we have discovered, we have also discovered at the same time in Halo. And so, based on the fact that our history in real life is the same as our history in Halo, does that by extension mean that Halo is our future? Does that mean that Halo is actually real? Well, in isolation, you'd have no reason to doubt that fact. I mean, if current history is the exact same, then why wouldn't the future be the exact same? And further, if you double this theory up with the precursors being real, then given that they originated from Halo, who's to say that they don't use neural physics to bend and morph our future so that it aligns one-to-one with Halo, the universe that they came from, to ensure that we, the Reclaimers, secure what our ancestors left behind for us? Sadly, none of us watching this video right now will be alive to know if that ever happens, unless one of you guys happens to go the Walt Disney route and freeze your brain, in which case, well, enjoy the future. But if that does happen, if all of this is true, then that means that right now, out there in the sky, there is a Halo ring called Delta Halo, and on that ring is a cataclysmic flood outbreak, and the infected are currently building a Gravemind, and in about 500 years' time, we are gonna have a pretty nasty run-in with that thing. Let's just hope that, just like in Halo, that outbreak stays contained to Delta Halo for another 500 years, because if I look out my window and see a flood ship crashing down in the UK, before I get to release this video that I've spent an insane amount of time making, I'm gonna be really angry. Stonehenge. Staying with the meta, we have the source of a litany of real-world conspiracy theories that, again, thanks to Iris, transcended into the Halo universe as well. Of course, I'm talking about Stonehenge. For years, people have ruminated on the idea that Stonehenge was built by ancient Celtic priests using druidic secrets, or that it has something to do with time travel, or that it acts as some kind of gateway to another realm, or that it was built by aliens or by an ancient, highly technologically advanced species who have since vanished. Well, the Halo universe takes those final theories and confirms them in Halo's lore. As a part of Iris, one of the key historical anomalies that the Society of the Ancients talk about is Stonehenge. How did they do it? Why did they do it? Hundreds of years of work to build a calendar seems like a faulty explanation, and it's heavily implied that Stonehenge was created with some sort of foreigner assistance. Now, it likely wasn't physical, literal assistance, given that Stonehenge was built in 3100 BC, and of course, by 97,000 BC, the foreigners were completely gone, the Halos had been fired, and our era of the galaxy had begun. So instead, the Bronze Age humans who built Stonehenge were likely guided by their Yesch and by their role as Reclaimers to construct it, in particular to construct it in the shape that it is. It's no coincidence that from a bird's eye view, Stonehenge shares a startling similarity to a foreigner glyph. Its actual purpose though, in universe, is entirely unknown, but you know what, I would love to see a Halo story at some point soon that had some kind of esoteric meaning and purpose to Stonehenge that has something to do with the foreigners, or hell, even the precursors, man. That's such a cool avenue of Halo lore that they should definitely go down at some point. Flood infection of the soul. Now, I've covered a lot of creepy, disturbing, unsettling flood facts so far in this iceberg and across my entire channel over the years, but I've gotta say, I think the flood's infection and degradation of the soul has got to be the worst, most terrifying aspect of them. So this all focuses around the composer and what it was originally used for. The composer was a foreigner device that painfully extracted the essence of a biological individual and converted it into raw data, allowing it to become an AI, to exist in the domain, or later, as we saw with the Promethean Knights, to assume control of an inorganic body. Now, the composer functioned based on precursor neural physics, and was highly effective at what it was built to do. So, that led the creator of the Halos, Faber, to try and use the composer on combat forms, and also some other flood-infected individuals, to try and free their essence, their soul, from their infected body, and implant it in a new artificial body, thus, in a way, curing them of infection. It seemed like a sound, logical plan. But the results were, in the words of the librarian, horrible. Not only was the process immensely painful, but somehow the very essence of an individual was corrupted within their body. No essence taken from an infected host survived on its own, and when implanted into an artificial body which was entirely free from infection, they would soon decay and die. The minutiae of how this would occur was left untouched, but the mere fact that extracting your soul from your body isn't enough to free you from flood infection is terrifying, and only furthers the notion that a cure for the parasite simply cannot exist. From the moment of infection, even your soul is compromised. The Primordials' words. And penultimately, we have another instance of flood/precursor compromisation of an almost equal level of horror. So the ancient humans were the first ones to discover the captive, as they called it, the primordial, which declared itself as the last precursor and the first gravemind. Upon discovery, the humans captured it, hence its nickname, and interrogated it. Given that this was during the height of the humans' war with the Flood, which was going horrendously, they asked this being about the Flood, but the answers that the captive gave them was so deeply disturbing that it caused all present to commit suicide instead of continuing to live with this newfound knowledge. And so, the big disturbing question is, what exactly did the Primordials say to these humans that was so horrific it caused them to commit suicide? Well, my guess is that it told them that regardless of whether their war with the parasite ended in victory or defeat, the Flood are infinite and would eventually return anyway. Perhaps it also told them what it told MendicantDG, that the Flood are the next natural step in galactic evolution, and that to deny infection and assimilation is to deny evolution. Or perhaps it informed them that beyond the boundaries of their region of space exist entire infected galaxies of Flood, just waiting to spread into their galaxy. And that brings us perfectly to the final entry in this colossal iceberg, and how fitting of an entry it is: the transgalactic outbreak. The Forerunners established several distinct stages of Flood outbreak. Feral, the beginning phase; Coordinated, the Gravemind phase; Interstellar, in which the Flood gained the intelligence to travel between star systems; and then a final stage that was so cataclysmic and horrific that for the most part it remained theoretical. The transgalactic stage, in which the Flood have consumed an entire galaxy of flesh and bone, and have thus gained sufficient intelligence to travel between galaxies. Right before the Halos were fired, the Gravemind sent an ancient human soul to the librarian to tell her that the Flood had indeed consumed other galaxies. It said that 10,000 planets worth of infected lay beyond the Milky Way, which creates this idea of a transgalactic outbreak, an outbreak so large that it spans multiple galaxies. The idea that right now in the Halo universe, beyond the borders of the Milky Way, are entire galaxies that have been consumed by the Flood, the fruits of which are just waiting ever so slightly beyond our gaze to enter the Milky Way with a force never even imagined to consume everything that we hold dear, is terrifying. This is the ultimate final stage of the Flood. I mean, I guess if you want to say that they reach the trans-universe stage, then they can infect multiple universes. I guess that's the next step, but that is real theoretical and extremely hypothetical. In my eyes, the transgalactic stage and level of outbreak with the Flood is what will fill the role of the Precursor's final test for humanity. I imagine that the final test will be multiple galaxies of Flood convening to attack humanity in the Milky Way. The thought of which is horrific. I mean, for all we know, the Milky Way galaxy might just be the last galaxy in existence that isn't infected by the Flood. Right now, we might be surrounded by millions of galaxies full of a septillion infected, just waiting to break the veil and come into our galaxy. And so, that, my friends, is the ultimate disturbing, interesting, and just downright comprehensive Halo Iceberg. If you made it all the way to the end, I cannot thank you enough. This video has been an extreme labour of love and time and effort. So if you enjoyed and you haven't done so yet, then, you know, a like, a sub, and all that stuff down below would be greatly appreciated. I am going to round this colossal video out there. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you also to everyone who supports me over on Patreon. Thank you very much for that. And again, I'm just gonna say it one more time. This video has been just a labor of love. I've probably not put this much effort into a video in a long time. Hopefully it showed. I hope. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And I'll catch you all in the next one.